Wait for Rory elected.
Clock in front of me. My name is Tony Jones. I'm the councillor chairing the meeting this evening. A few announcements just to begin with. I've had a number of requests for people to film this meeting, or at least parts of this meeting, which I've agreed to, but there are some ground rules that they will need to follow. There's a camera there, and a camera on the other side. I think filming any of us in this part of the chamber is fair game. Anybody comes up to speak is fair game, but not filming members of the public. So no panning shots of people you've had no permission to film. So you can concentrate on us as much as you like, but don't vary from that. If I think you are moving away from that, then I will ask you to stop, and if necessary, I'll ask you to leave the chamber. But I'm sure we will come to that, guys, because we agreed on this beforehand, haven't we? We have. Well, this is a new committee, so this is a new start for all of us in this forum. We've got some important business throughout the agenda this evening. I'm sure all of us will want to ensure that we deal with this in an efficient way, but also in a way which shows courtesy to our fellow councillors and to the officers and to any other interested parties. This is an effort by the council to show that we want to be as transparent as possible in the way that we conduct our business. So if you look at the rule book says there could be up to 5 minutes speaking rights for members of the public. I have to say, given what we have on the agenda, I've now had a list of people who have indicated they wish to speak. And I believe it would be unfair to say in total you have to share 5 minutes before you, because I think that would go against the spirit of what we're trying to do. So I'm going to give each and every person who's given me notice so far, that the meeting started, the courtesy of up to 5 minutes. I think we said that should be 4 questions. I'm going to take a more liberal approach on that. You can use the 5 minutes to make statements if you wish, although I would encourage you, if you want to make a point, if you want to ask questions or you want questions answered, then you should ensure those contained within your 5-minute presentation. I also intend to take all the speaking rights at once because they arrange over 2 items on the agenda, and I think it's probably best if we deal with it in that way, and then the councillors can get on with the business in hand. So I'd just like to, first of all, list to you those people who indicated they wish to speak, because this will be the order in which they will be called. Before I do that, Councillor Forston.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd just like to have it recorded that Councillor Wynne is unable to be here tonight. She had long ago booked a holiday before she knew of this meeting being in the diary. And Councillor Anderson is unable to get here promptly because of work, I'm afraid. But he'll be here when he can be.
Thank you, Councillor. I've been aware of both situations. So the public speaking rights will be extended to, in this order, Colin Trinder, Marion Pike, Councillor Ed Popper, who in this circumstance counts as a member of the public. I'll treat you as such because we bracket you that way. Rob Wilson MP, Juliana Beecroft, and Janet Bull. And for those of you who were in the council meeting last time, a slight switch. We'd like to come down to this side of the chamber. I'm told because you'll get a better profile from that camera than the other one. Anyway, have something to rest any papers on if you so wish. So we'll come to that very shortly. The first formal item on the agenda is the declaration of interest. Any councillors to declare any disposable pecuniary interests?
If I may, for the record, I'd just like to say that on item 13, I have a personal but non-prejudicial interest because of being chair of governors at the Avenue Special School.
Thank you, Councillor Bolton. Anybody else? No, thank you. 2 minutes of other bodies. Children's Safeguarding Panel meeting held on the 5th of June. Was accepted. Agreed. And the Children's Trust Partnership Board on the 22nd of May. Those accepted and agreed. Third item is petitions and petitions. Thank you. Item 4 then, listed as questions from members of the public and councillors. I think this is where we will introduce the public speaking rights. So can I call upon Mr. Colin Chinder, please? Colin Chinder.
Thank you.
To avoid people moving about, perhaps a couple of people with the pictures just out to the front, if that's okay with you.
We've agreed out procedure, I know you're using your time.
Okay. There is no doubt in anybody's mind that Arthur Clark Home is first class in its quality of care. So I'll not labour this point, other than to say it cannot be measured how far this goes to saving other health services time and money. There are some pictures of residents who are so lovingly looked after, you can show those up please, at Arthur Clark Home, for whom there will be no facilities such as this north of the river if you close it. For those of you who have not visited the site, I trust these pictures will give you an indication of the frail folk that live there and the danger that they would be in moved out permanently to an unsuitable alternative home out of their area, away from their friends, against their wishes, with no promise of return. There are only 2 CPC registered residential care homes in Caversham, north of the river. Arthur Clark is one, and Summerfield is the other. St Luke's is in Emma Green, and far too far for elderly friends and community to access people between services, given the huge hills between the 2 areas. So, with an ageing population across this part of Reading of circa 25% over 60, something needs to be done now and for the future to preserve a much loved and needed local service. It has been proven that the care facilities is needed in this location. Space across the whole site, including the day centre, could be integrated, utilised and maximised to give essential excellence of care. Both residential and flexible respite badly needed but undercover sites. Councillor Eden has stated on numerous occasions that this is not about finance, but ongoing finance seems to be cited as a reason investment might not be viable. So surely with residents and community wanting the facility, investment must be made. The council could invest in this great facility by building an extension to move residents into and utilise all the space at the Arthur Clark site. At no point has a report been commissioned. Ways to keep Arthur Clark open and maximise return. If finance is an issue, has the council received any donations, promises to keep the home open? Has it asked for officer support, explored the possibility of a benefactor or 2? If not, we ask that this be done. Likewise, temporary funding and then a sale to private provider be investigated. To your knowledge, is there a developer waiting in the wings to purchase the plot once it is emptied? As some cynics are suggesting that this is the real reason for closing the facilities. Have no expressions of interest whatsoever been sought or taken home in its upgraded state or as it is? If this facility goes, there will be nothing north of the river to replace it. Having finally received the 2006 survey requested 2 months ago, there is no doubt that essential works that need doing now, in my mind, could be done around residents. this option has not been explored in anywhere near enough detail. For example, felt roofing tiles could be overcladded with lightweight slates from the outside without disturbing them inside. We would ask the Council purely to carry out the works that need doing now with the residents in situ and look at a long-term plan of upgrading as many areas as they come vacant. If there were a council tenant, they would have the right to stay in their home until they passed on. We are merely asking the same for these people. Thank you. In conclusion, we would request that the Council carries out the necessary works to make the premises safe now, with the rest on a rolling programme, and at least give residents the informed choice to stay while the works are carried out, or decanted for a temporary period, with seconded staff, with the promise of a return to Arthur Clarke Code. We would ask councillors to publicly state that housing will not take over this site, yet it is clearly needed for the community. At very least, much more investigation needs to be done on the best way to retain this essential community facility without destroying people's lives in the process. Thank you very much.
Marion Pike, please.
Thank you very much for letting me speak to you. I think I should have come forward a long time ago because I have a very personal interest in the Arthur Clarke. First of all, yes, I'm a Reverend Marion Pike. My parish is St Peter's, St John's and St Margaret's Maple Durham. A huge, huge parish. And those that know St Peter, we're only a couple of 100 yards away from the Arthur Clarke home. So surprise, surprise, nobody said to me, do you go in there? And of course I do. I see them as part of the community. I also come pretty well informed as I was a psychiatric social worker for 20 years, dealing very much with the elderly, people who have dementia. And one of the first things you do when you have people who are old with dementia is you don't move them out of their community. That's an extremely important fact. On a personal level, I have to say that 2 years ago my mother died in the Arthur Clarke home. A lady who had dementia but knew that she was still in Caversham, knew that she was just away from the church that she loved. And for me, as a consumer, it was wonderful to know that my mother was only half a mile away from my house and I could go and visit her every day. I speak to so many families whose parents are put so far away from them. I have one family in my parish who have to make a whole day's journey to go and see their elderly father. They can't afford it and the emotional strain on them is tremendous. What we have in the Arthur Clarke home and the day centre is something, I mean, if you know Caversham, Caversham is a very tightly community. People stick together. I run a huge pastoral team in my church. We go out and find the people that need things. Well, you've got it right on our doorstep at Arthur Clarke and the day centre. I had a quick look, and over 2 years, I've had 8 people from my congregation go to the day centre. I take communion, I haven't for the last couple of months, but I usually take communion to the day centre, and there they are, and they're so pleased because they know me, their families are comfortable because they know they're in the right area where they are. I also have 2 ladies in my congregation at the moment. They're both in their late 80s, and they're both saying to me, we're going to go to the Arthur Clarke home when we need residential care. Well, are they? I haven't got the heart to tell them. They are suffering from the beginnings of dementia. So there's no way I'm going to say to them, no, I don't think so. But their families, their faces, when they think of the prospects of where their elderly parents are going to go. So just to underline again, I really want to say, please don't move the elderly unless you really, really have to. Do not move the elderly that have dementia, because, well, just don't. And how wonderful if you've lived in Caversham all your life And we've got so many families and elderly that have lived there all their life. It's that sort of place that they know that there's somewhere where they can actually go, especially the day centre. I mean, I've just seen people, I've seen wives relapse when they know they can bring their dementing husband for a few hours and actually leave the house. What would they do if they had to take them miles and miles to begin with? I think you're rather getting the idea. I feel very strongly about what you're about to do. So please don't.
Thank you. Councillor Ed Hopper.
Members of the committee will recall my views on the possibility of closing up Clark Care from last Tuesday's meeting, so I won't go over them all again, or I'll try and bring new things for you to consider. The council is also hearing from members of the public and from members of the ministry team in the local area who are representing the 3,500 people in the ward who have signed the petition to keep the Clark Care home open. What I would like to start by asking committee members to do, and you may not be able to do this, is turn to page B126 of your report and spend a little time rereading the paragraph detailing the impact that closing up the care home would have on vulnerable people. It's one of the appendices, but I'll read you the key parts. It says, moving home carries potential health risk for other people. It also says, a move could involve friends and family having to travel further to visit, and elderly people could find this challenging. And it also says elderly people who have been used to staying in the home for respite care would be unsettled by needing to find an alternative service. I don't think that the importance of these points, especially the first two, can be understated. And the mitigation on page B27 about there being 40 similar services within a 5-mile radius really doesn't make it clear that a 5-mile radius, if you look at the map, goes as far as the outskirts of Henley-on-Thames, Field, Pangbourne, and 3 Mile Cross to the south. They are hardly what elderly residents would call local. Reading through the whole document and the appendices, which I've done, what seems clear is that this is an exercise which appears to have been conducted on the assumption that the home should be closed, rather than the home should be kept open. The language used applies to the efforts going one way, not the other. Councillor Eden has stated publicly that this is not an economic decision. And this is genuinely the case, and I hope it is. I think Councillor Eden should welcome some of the suggestions which have been made by members of the Save After Clark campaign, from respondents to the consultation, and from ward members. Many of these, however, don't seem to have made it into the report in front of us this evening, and where they have, they appear to have been downplayed. I am hopeful that the members of the committee are sympathetic to the plight of the residents and are therefore looking for a way to keep their care home open this evening. With that in mind, I'd like to remind the committee that you are, or at least I think I'm correct in this, that you're not limited to making a decision only between the options that officers put in front of you. And the committees do have the power to suggest alternatives, remove unacceptable elements, and even ask officers to go away and come back with additional options. The additional options could include, as we mentioned before, perhaps option 5, undertake a rolling programme of work, minimising disruption, removing the need for residents to vacate the building. Option 6, initiate conversations with not-for-profit charity care providers, private care providers or community interest groups. It's my opinion, stands to be addressed, it's my opinion that this has not been a full consultation, and it should therefore be rejected by the committee and the council to give a commitment that both Arthur Clark and Arthur Road will receive the investment they need to continue to offer what's a hugely valuable community resource. And that's what 3,500 people are calling for in the petition. That's what I'm calling for, and I hope the committee and the council will agree and make the right decision tonight. Thank you very much.
Mr. Rob Wilson, MP. 5 minutes to sit
Of course. Thank you, Councillor Jones, and thank you, members of the committee, for allowing me to speak this evening. And I'd like to begin by thanking the campaigners who have supported the Save the Arthur Clark home campaign. You should all be very, very proud of the campaign that you've run, and I'm certainly very proud to support you and to represent you. It's captured the imagination of the Reading public in a way that I think I've rarely seen, and it's been overwhelming, the response to that campaign. But tonight isn't about politics, it's about people. It's about very elderly people who were settled and happy and are now frightened about their future. Around 20 elderly people and their families have had their lives turned upside down by the local authority, and for what reason? Well, none that I can discern. I know that there are very difficult financial decisions to be made in government, in local government and in the country, and I don't back away from any of those for one single moment. I don't criticise Reading Borough Council for making difficult decisions, but I do criticise them for making this particular decision. The consultation, as was explained to families and me at a meeting held at the Arthur Clarke home, is essentially, as Councillor Hobbs said, about closing the home, not about realistic alternatives. The council, which has failed to invest in the Arthur Clarke home, is now saying that that lack of investment is a reason to close it. That is a failure of both management and duty of care to the residents. This is a home that has had a good report from the CQC, where residents are happy and well cared for by staff. It's not state-of-the-art, but nor are the recommended list of other care homes that the council has suggested that families take their loved ones to. In fact, some are far worse, and a lot further away from their loved ones. As far as I can tell, there's been no attempt to look at selling the home as a going concern to the private sector or a community interest company. Now that the government has allowed the community the right to bid for such properties. I want to put on record tonight that if the council foolishly closes this home, the community will wish to take the home off the council's hands. And I will support the Save Arthur Clarke Care Home, and that's a mouthful, I can tell you, campaign in its own July the 4th Declaration of Independence from Reading Borough Council. I've looked on at times astonished as the council has questioned whether families know what is best for their own loved ones. The council claims it doesn't want to inconvenience residents by having people moved in and out of the accommodation whilst renovating. Yet isn't that a matter for families themselves to decide? Don't they know what's best for their own families? I find the notion that a local authority knows a family's loved ones better than the family itself frankly absurd. I also fear that another care home closure will put additional strain on the local NHS. We already have significant bed blocking. I was shocked that no detailed work has been undertaken by Reading Borough Council with the hospital or the CCGs. What discussion has even taken place on its own health and wellbeing board? But my biggest concern is for the elderly people themselves in probably the last few years of their lives. What's going to happen to the current Arthur Clarke residents' care home? Where are they going to be moved to? Will the move involve longer distances from their families and communities, or will their health suffer as a result? For these reasons, I think this proposed closure is ethically and morally wrong. Reading needs this care home, Caversham needs this care home, the families need this care home. I'm very sorry indeed that Reading Borough Council doesn't want this care home and is out of step with the community of campaigning in such huge numbers. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. Julia Beecroft, please.
My name is Juliana Beecroft, and I speak on behalf of the carers of those attending Albert Road Day Centre. By now, you will have all heard and read many comments expressing how great the Albert Road Day Centre is and how wonderful and caring the staff are. And we come together today to reinforce these opinions. Indeed, there would have been more of us here today, as many of my fellow carers were extremely keen to attend this meeting, but due to the very nature of our caring role, they are unable to, as they're currently at home caring for their loved ones. The Albert Road Day Centre is, in its lovely, peaceful surroundings, a small and intimate place which many of our relatives need. I have already said that the staff are exceptional, but because of the size of the centre, they are able to tailor and structure each day's activities around the needs and interests of every individual. I see this in action myself when I go and collect my 83-year-old mother, who's been attending there for more than 10 years. For those of us, both carers and service users, who have had the opportunity of visiting the Phoenix Centre, one aspect which strikes us all straight away is the sheer size and much more impersonal nature compared to the cosy home from home we are all used to and feel comfortable with. Now let me turn to the location of the Albert Road Day Centre. Many of our loved ones travel there using Reading Borough Council transport. A longer journey to the Phoenix with more pickups en route and the unpredictability of the Reading traffic would be unnecessarily exhausting and stressful, particularly at the end of the day. Some of our loved ones, however, for varying health reasons, need to be transported by us, so the proximity of Albert Road to our homes is crucial when fitting it around our other family and work commitments. For myself, the journey to the day centre takes just 5 minutes, which I can easily manage around taking my 5-year-old daughter to her local school. It would be incredibly difficult for me to take my mother to Phoenix. For those of us who also balance work commitments with our caring roles and whose free time is minimal, it would be a struggle to find that extra time which would be required to ferry our loved ones across the Tyler, creating additional stress in our already stressful lives. Another point to consider is that some service users recovering from bouts of illness or after hospital stays will return to the day centre for as little as an hour or two initially, something which works so well to aid their recovery, build confidence and give that vital support to carers. Would such a short session after a long journey to Tyler be either practical or beneficial to the service user? We think not. We ask you to reconsider your views that the day centre in Caversham is not needed. Indeed, we are well aware that both Age UK and the Alzheimer's Society successfully manage to run small part-time care for their clients in smaller locations within the Caversham area, a sure reflection that one size does not fit all.
Janet Paul, please.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I'm Janet Paul, as you've just heard, and I was a 24/7 carer for my late husband, who used both the Albert Road Day Centre and the Arthur Clark Home. Now I am on the committee of the Friends of the Albert Road Day Centre. Over the past 6 years, we have raised thousands of pounds to be able to fund enrichment activities which Reading Borough Council would not have been able to provide. Phoenix Centre do not have a Friends group, as it is not regarded by the carers and users as a local facility. Our success shows that the Albert Road Day Centre has the continuing support of local people and local businesses who value and support it. Reading Borough Council's case for merging the Albert Road Day Centre with the Phoenix is based in part on the shrinking numbers of clients at both day centres. We believe that there are 2 reasons for this, for the reduced numbers attending. Firstly, the big increase of the fee over the last 2 years. There used to be a waiting list at Albert Road. Secondly, poor marketing of these services by Reading Borough Council. Your report on the community assets in Caversham, north of the river area, item 8, appendix 1, which was in response to a request from the Director of Education, Social Services and Housing to consider using Caversham area as a trial location for the co-development of an older people's neighbourhood centre. Sorry, that's a long title. Acknowledges that there are, quote, high numbers and concentrations of older people across this part of town, end quote. There are figures here, which I'm sure you will all read, which are quite amazing, I think, in percentages of old people in our area north of the river. We know that there are many, many vulnerable people, elderly people, living in isolation in their own homes in Caversham, who could benefit immensely from attending their local Albert Road Day Centre, if they were properly informed of what services are on offer. The demographic summary of the area north of the river shows that there will be hugely increasing numbers of people in this situation over the next 20 years, as the baby boomer generation hit their 80s. What are you going to do with us? Are you going to plus us out of our local area, across town, because it suits you but not us? We appeal to all members of this committee to vote not only to preserve this vital and much appreciated local day centre, but to extend its uses for the increasing number of elderly electors in the north of Reading. Perhaps this could be combined with the current suggestion, to which I referred earlier, of an older people's neighbourhood centre. I also have a following question to ask. In the consultation about the merger of the ARDC with Phoenix, how many replies were from people related to Albert Road Day Centre? I ask this because this is really to do with the closure of the Albert Road Day Centre and will have the biggest impact on its users' families, with comparatively little impact on those of Phoenix. Although numbers and percentages appear in the reports, one phrase stands out as an inadequate piece of information as a result of the consultation. The phrase is used around half of the people. This could be anything from 60-40 to 51-49. Please can we have this clarified by the officers for the benefit of the councillors and the general public. Thank you very much.
Can I say thank you to all the speakers for the time and effort they've taken to come to address the committee tonight. It is appreciated, and I know some people have made considerable efforts to come this evening. There are no decision book references, so now we move on to the substantial issues before us. Item 6, improving residential services future of the Arthur Clark Care Home. Councillor Eden, how would you like to introduce this?
Thank you, Councillor. I would like Ms. Wilson to introduce the report, explain the answers to the content, if that's okay. And then I think what would be very helpful for all of us in the committee would be a chance for us to put our questions before we have a debate. So we'll put our questions to her, and then we'll move on to the debate of the substantial issue.
Okay, everybody understand that? This is for the councillors only, so we'll
Sorry.
Okay. What we'll do next then is we'll hear from Ava Wilson, the Director, the officer responsible for this report. Then we will take questions from councillors. We will have a debate, but questions from councillors first, either direct questions or issues of clarification, and then we will open up the report to debate. So even if you've asked a question, you'll still be able then to participate in the debate. When we get to the debate though, I will say to you, you'll have one chance to speak. So you really do need to think, not having people come in and go out all the time, you really need to think about how you participate in the debate. So, Abby Wilson, over to you, please.
Thank you, Chair, and through you. The report before committee this evening is an update from the report that was first brought to Cabinet in February of this year. And the report seeks to update the committee on the summary of the feedback on the consultation process that we've just been through, a view from officers on the options that are available, very importantly, findings of the equality impact assessment, which has already been referred to, and an independent survey, which is the thick documentation appended at Appendix D. Chair, I would keep my remarks in relation to the home itself to a minimum. I think that most people here will be aware that the home is a very well loved and known facility in the Caversham area. It's a 28-bedded home which currently can accommodate up to 25 elderly and frail residents, 2 beds being available for respite care and a third bed having been turned into office accommodation. The quality of the care is a tribute to the staff who work there, and I think they have been surprised and delighted by the response that they have received during the consultation, which is a real tribute to what they're able to do for a number of very vulnerable residents. The building itself was constructed in the 1950s, and unfortunately the quality of the building doesn't match the quality of the care that's currently available. There's been a number of surveys since 2005. There was an independent building survey in 2005 which put council on notice that works were required to move the building. Since that point, there's been additional fire risk assessment work, an asbestos survey was commissioned. In 2012, there was a further update in terms of the building's condition survey. And obviously, over the last few weeks, there's now been an independent survey commissioned very much at the behest of the families concerned to give an independent view of works that might be required on the building. I have to say, Chair, through you, that the independent survey report has highlighted that there are some very urgent works that need to be undertaken at the building. Primarily in relation to the roof and mechanical engineering plumbing system. And the survey report refers to possible critical failure of the building, which is a very risky thing in relation to care for frail elderly people. What the survey has also highlighted is that there are some areas of work that are required to make building compliant with purposes of the Disability Discrimination Act. Installing different toilet and bathroom facilities next to the dining room, for example, and considerable attention needing to be paid to the lift, which is not compliant with current regulations. There's also been some discussion as to whether the council should seek this opportunity, given that it knows that it needs to undertake building work as one of the options before it, to seek to upgrade to a modern day standard for care homes, i.e. those homes that would meet the 2010 regulations that are now in force. Now, I must stress to the committee that it doesn't have to take a decision to move to those modern standards, but it does need to show that it is given proper consideration because it is undertaking works at the site of the impact of a major and substantial nature. Just turning to those modern standards, at the moment only 6 out of 25 bedrooms that are available meet the modern standard of 12 square metres. Now the impact of that is that for a number of people with disabilities, particularly those using particular types of wheelchair, the we're not able to accommodate their needs within the building. We have a ratio of 5 to 1 people sharing communal toilet and bathroom facilities, which is unlikely to meet the needs of some black and minority ethnic communities. It's also, I think, a moot point as to whether shared bathroom and toilet facilities are conducive to maintaining privacy, dignity and independence, which I think is the standard that everyone party to this debate would wish to move on. On that basis, Chair, officers have identified 4 specific options. The first option is to vacate the home for a period of approximately, we think, 12 weeks. That could vary. It could be 10 weeks, it could be 14 weeks. We wouldn't know until the orders were on site. To undertake the absolute essential works that need to be undertaken, which I've already outlined to you. This would be at a capital cost of approximately £420,000, with an additional £300,000 being required for other essential works within the not too distant future. So I'm not referring there to absolutely essential, necessary, urgent works. I'm referring to things that would need to be done within a fairly short period. We believe at this time that we would have to vacate the premises to undertake those works, and that's the advice we've had both from the surveyors and based on our own experience of maintaining safe care routines within the home. The second option that's available to the committee is to effectively say that they would move residents out of the building for long period, based on our experience of refurbishment of the Willows in 2010, that would be at least 6 months, and to seek at that point to upgrade the home to the highest possible building standards that are required in terms of modern day facilities. The capital cost of these works would be around 1.4 million, with an additional 420 or so million required over a 5-year period, rolling period. Options 1 and 2, I think, do represent the preference of family members in the context of wanting to keep the home open, and if there is a move from the premises, that people could then move back once the building works were finalised. We've already heard reference this evening to the dangers of moving elderly people. If we undertook what's effectively a double move, i.e. move people out into temporary accommodation and then moving them back, we actually increase the risk, and that is a factor that I would ask you to take into account in terms of your decision making this evening. The third option is that the home is closed and that permanent alternative places are sought within the local care home market. This would take place, if the committee so decided, over some months, so we would have a planned move of residents during warmer weather, which is an important factor in terms of people who have a tendency to suffer from respiratory problems. That option would meet the Council's stated aspiration to have residents in good quality care backed by good quality facilities. But I have to make clear to the committee that this is absolutely not the preference of family members who have been consulted. Option 4, which has also been put forward by some family members, although I understand this position may have changed slightly in light of the works that do need to be undertaken, would be to leave people in the home until such time as they moved on to other forms of care, for example, for nursing care or dementia, or sadly passed away. I think there are some difficulties with that in the sense that we now know that the building does need urgent works, and we would start to be running risk around catastrophic failure of, say, the heating system in the middle of winter, which would mean emergency evacuation of 20 elderly and frail people in a very unplanned and rushed manner. I'd also draw the committee's attention to the fact that there could be a negative psychological impact in the sense that whilst the home had 20 people, it remains a vibrant community. But as those people were no longer in the home, it would be difficult to sustain that when members have fallen to a certain end. So, Chair, really, those are the main options that officers have identified. I have to mention that on the basis of some additional conversations with families, and I think Councillor Hopper has referred to some of this, that one option has been put forward would be to market respite care at the home to other self-funders in the local community. We've done a very quick calculation and think that that might bring forward an income stream of something between £30,000 to £40,000 per annum. I mention this not as the main option in terms of the building works that are required. There are clearly a number of avenues that could be pursued, such as this one, with the offer of a free marketing campaign thrown in, which you could ask officers to pursue in terms of looking at different ways to use the building and its facilities. I'd say nothing further at this point, Chair, but would commend the report to committee and obviously be happy to answer any queries that anyone may have.
Okay, thank you for that. Any questions? Councillor Gavin, and then Gallico, somebody else? Austin. Start with Councillor Gavin, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
I'm sorry, can people speak up, please, because we can't hear them at the back.
Through you, Chair, to Ms Wilson. Many of the emails and the literature that has been circulated to members of the committee by supporters of the campaign to save our car say that if we decide this evening to go for one of the options which involve either moving the residents or closing the home, that we would be making the residents homeless. I wonder whether you could comment on that and perhaps explain our responsibilities to the residents in the home. And secondly, if residents are moved, do have to be moved, I mean, even with kept the home open and with the renovation work they would have to be moved, what can we think about moving in friendship groups and and so on and so forth? So these are some of the things that I've heard from the campaign. Thank you.
Do you want to take them separately or let's deal with them separately, issues at the end.
Chair, through you, no question of anybody who is a resident currently at the home becoming homeless. That would be a complete breach of any duty of care that the council owe to its elderly people in the community. I think the concern that may be being expressed is that a consideration that there aren't suitable care homes within that area. In fact, we have identified one care home which I think has already been referred to as being in Evergreen, and I think technically it is in Evergreen, but it's a mile away. So 4 minutes by car, a mile away from Arthur Park, which we think will be eminently suitable for those people who've got residential care needs. And they do have provision which would include the provision of en-suite bathrooms.
Do you want to name that?
I'm happy to, Chair. It's St Luke's and Yokes. in terms of friendship groups, we would have to be careful, simply because the range of needs within the existing cohort of people within the home is quite varied. And on the assessments we've done to date, 5 people will require nursing care, and 3 people will require dementia care. So we would have 12 people who require residential care. Where it is possible for us to do so, and there's an expressed desire on the part of the individual to move in a friendship group, we would absolutely seek to support them.
I know we always struggle with the acoustics in this room, but if people are able to either project a voice or better still use a microphone. I don't think I need it. I think that's what others may benefit. So, Councillor McGilligan, and then I think we can have the mic back up to you from afterwards.
Thank you, Chair. Right now I'm scared. Through you, Chair, to Apple Wilson, can you help me by just clarifying a bit more about the urgent works that need to be done to the Arthur Clarke home, and also to clarify why these can't be done in the residence in situ?
It's not like it's on questions, Anne.
Thank you, Chair, and my apologies to those people who have not been able to hear me. Through you, Chair, the essential works that need to be done at the home, and I do mean essential, and if a decision is taken to keep the home open, we would be seeking to commission those works tomorrow, would be the mechanical engineering and plumbing system, which is absolutely time expired. The roof, which is both the flat roof and the pitch roof, where we know there are considerable works that need to be done, and the report from 2012 actually does notify us that the roof is leaking. Some of the rewiring work in terms of the electrics and some of the other minor but essential works around the building fabric. I think my particular concern is the mechanical engineering works that do need to be done. I think the second part of your question relates to, would it be possible to keep people in the home and do a sort of a phased approach to the works that we need to be done. We've considered that question at some length, and I am of the opinion that we would need to vacate residents to do the works. We have an unknown asbestos risk within the building. We know that there's asbestos in the building. We don't at the moment know the level and threat that would actually pose. I'm told by those who are expert in this field that in fact we wouldn't know what level of asbestos was in the building until we started to undertake structural works. At that point, of course, we might potentially have to vacate the building in any event if that turns out to be a level 3. Our knowledge and understanding of the sort of construction from Berkshire County homes that were built in the 1950s, of which this is one, is that it will contain asbestos because buildings of that age and that nature tend to. And that's also based on our experience of the Willows, where there was considerable asbestos, even though at that point we thought it was only level 1. The building was actually riddled with asbestos. The second element of the question is really around, could we maintain a safe care routine if we left people in what effectively would be a building site. Building sites inevitably bring with them mess and disruption, and I think that's difficult for younger, able-bodied people to deal with. Our concern for frail elderly people would be additional risks around tripping hazards, for example, dust and noise, which if somebody has a respiratory condition, which I've already referred to, could be a particular issue. And if we don't vacate the building, the works take considerably longer. You have a rolling programme. So effectively, we would have quite frail people in a building site for an unknown period of time. So our best advice at the moment is that we should, if committee wishes to keep the home open, at either of the options around the lower level building works, or indeed moving to a major upgrade, that we would have to move residents out.
Thank you. Councillor Borson, please. The mic reaches you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Am I allowed to ask more than one question, please?
Okay.
Thank you, I have got several. Through you to Admiral Wilson, why is there no mention in this report about the ageing population in Caversham? Surely the fact that in the 2011 census, 29% of residents in my ward in Caversham Heights are over 60, with 27% in Peppard Ward and 21% in Thames Ward, is of great importance and should be borne in mind when making this decision tonight. Should I ask one question at a time and have the answer back? Or should I ask all my questions?
I'm thinking we might think it might be helpful if you just set up questions, please.
Okay, thank you. I'd be interested to know why weren't councillors from north of the river invited to any of the consultation meetings? I managed to self-invite myself to one meeting, but that was out of luck rather than invitation. We've heard another question from the councillor from the other side about the possibility of, or rather your reasons against doing building works and keeping residents in situ. But I'd like to know the answer to why hasn't the council documented the possibility of extending Arthur Clarke, building a new wing which would be separate to the current building, and then when that is finished, moving the residents into that new build section which could be safe for them to move into, whilst the rest of the building has the renovations that are necessary. I would like to know, because as the sheer weight of interest and support for the campaign to keep this home open has shown that there is a massive need for a facility in this area, specifically of Caversham Heights, because as one of the public speakers said at the beginning of the meeting, for an elderly person to go and visit.
We have a question.
Okay, I'm sorry, Chairman. Why did the council not publicise better the facilities on offer at the care home? The indication I'd like your opinion on is that the council has for several years had in mind to shut the home, and that makes people very frustrated. Another question I have is, has there been interest or preliminary offers from any company, organisation or individual for Arthur Clarke and or the Albert Road Daycare Centre, or the site as a whole, whether it be for retaining the homes or are you developing the site as, say, a new residential care home or housing or whatever else? Campaigners would very much like to know that answer. And another question, what efforts and steps has the council taken to market the homes to charities or private providers? I know that Rob Wilson MP has asked that question earlier and believes that not enough if anything has been done. And I'm just trying to see. I think those are my questions for the moment. Thank you.
Thank you.
Shall I return?
Yes, please.
Thank you, Chair, and through you. There is no doubt that the population in the north of Reading does have an elderly and growing elderly population. I think the demographics information that I'm seeing would indicate that between 2012 and 2020 there is something like a 21% increase in those people aged over 65 who would require either nursing care or dementia care or some form of residential care. And the Council is well aware of those figures. The same is true in some parts of the south of the borough, notably Southcote, which is the other concentration of older people within the area. I would also point out, of course, that the health profile of people north of the river is substantially better than in other parts of Reading. We genuinely believe that the increase in the demand for residential dementia and nursing care can be met within the private sector. 90% of the care that the Council currently purchases is within the private sector. And we would certainly be looking to develop community-based facilities that support that elderly population in the north of the borough, and indeed still have a commitment outstanding to the development of alternative forms of care provision, notably extra care housing. Moving on, I think the second question was why ward councillors were not invited to attend the consultation meetings. I have to say that those meetings were actually open to councillors if they did wish to attend. My apologies to the councillors concerned if that was not made clear to them, but in fact they did attend, I think, a meeting along with the local MP. I think the next question you asked me was whether there was the possibility of somehow building onto the site, decanting residents into a new building, and then some alternative use being made available for what's now the Arthur Clark site. I have to say that option has not been pursued, and the committee could, of course, instruct officers to develop a business case based on that. What I would say to committee is that when that sort of proposition was considered in relation to the Edward Hughes home back in 2010, the cost of developing alternative residential care home at that point on that site, and accept the figures might move around a bit, was 8.8 million. Now, I would ask the committee to take that into account if it wishes to pursue that as an option. I think the next point was in relation to publicising respite care and potentially facilities at Albert Road. And I have to say the one thing that the local campaign has absolutely highlighted, and the feedback that we've had through the Council's own consultation, is that the Council does need to do more to ensure that those who would benefit from a range of community services, not just those run by the Council, but available within that area, are made known. And there would be a very clear commitment from officers to actually seek to ensure that people are better informed, including revising directory resources. The next question, Chair, I think was in relation to whether we've received any offers from other providers at the site. We have previously considered whether this would be a going market concern, either into the private sector or indeed into voluntary sector providers. And understanding the market, and we talk on a pretty regular basis to that 90% of provision that is purchased by the council, is that people moving into this market are really looking for at least 40 bed, if not 60 bed homes, because of the economies of scale that they can then achieve around staffing, and would also be faced with the problems that indeed this committee will be asked to consider this evening in the context of a considerable capital investment needing to be made in the very short term and indeed in the long term to bring the home up to modern standards. And I think the last question, Chair, if I may, was has there been any offer made in terms of the site? To the best of my knowledge and understanding, there has been no consideration of any development on the site. I'm certainly not aware of any offers that have been made by a housing developer or others for that particular plot of land.
Okay, thank you. It's Councillor Ennis next, and then I'll come to Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. There's a number of questions I want to ask as well. You've answered some of them. I think some of them need repeating or emphasising. I've got 6. And it's really concentrating about community facility, but also about the move as well, because that's a bit I'm concerned about. Is move. I do apologise. Number 1.4, page B2, you talk about frail elderly residents would be required to move twice for significant risk to their health and well-being. You've explained it, but the families are not sure about that. So could you elaborate further why that might be the case? That's number 1. I'll take them all.
Yeah, yes, please.
And you've answered about can the work be done around the residents. Okay, that's fair enough. You said there's a big risk. Am I right in saying that every single option that's been put forward, including private, this is a question, Chair, every single option that's been put forward about moving, potential other people moving in, private companies, would involve a move at some point in the near future? That's number 1. And then also about moving out of their community. I've got one word for this. Move out of the community. You said 1 mile. I haven't heard anybody say that's not true, because I'm led to believe that it's a long way out of Caversham to other homes. Could you explain that again? And the final one is, I know the families, and can understand totally rightly so, are concerned. I want to keep their parents' families in the home, but who is responsible for the health and safety and well-being of the residents whilst in that home during renovation or not? Who is actually responsible? And then I'll...
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. Through you. I have advised on the Office of View on whether it will be possible to move residents and the risks of doing so if we did a double decant, i.e. we moved out and then moved back, and the additional risk factor that would be involved in that. I have to say residents themselves, and indeed their families, have been asked, certainly the residents have been asked the question, I'm not sure that applies to all the families, are very clear that they would prefer to take that risk than not to take that risk. However, in our professional opinion, it would put a number of individuals at risk. Certainly the council retains the responsibility for the health and safety of anybody who's present in the premises, which is one of the reasons that we believe that it wouldn't be possible to do the works with people in situ. And moving on very quickly, Chair, if a private provider were to come in, or a charitable provider, any sort of third-party provider, they would face exactly the same questions around the immediate works that need to be done, or an upgrade that in fact you're being asked to consider this evening. The fact that it's a private provider coming in a sense would be irrelevant. the work has to be done, and there would therefore be a question about whether people had to be moved out or not, which I hope I've answered to your satisfaction. The home that I referred to, as I say, is a mile from the current Arthur Clarke home, and indeed there are within 5 miles, and one appreciates that that's, for some people, may mean additional distances, but again for others may not, depending on where they live in the north of the area. There are 45 care facilities within a 5-mile radius of the Arthur Clarke postcode. If you take a more general postcoding for RG1, i.e. where we are now, that would be 42 facilities. So there are care homes within the area. And I think I need to make clear, Chair, through you, that this is not just a care home for the Caversham area. It is a care home for the community of Reading. And at the moment, 6 of the residents are from the Caversham area. The other 14 are not, which does demonstrate that people are prepared to move occasionally out of their community if they think that there's some benefit to doing so.
Thank you. Councillor Vickers, please, and then we'll have Councillor Williams and Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Chair. I have a vested interest in, as much as my mother is nearly 90, so, and it looks as though she may have to go into care. The thing that worries me is
we have a question. We can have a bit later.
Oh, the question is there a maintenance programme on both of the house? Because a lot of the fabric of some of it is major, but like doors that need replacing, that seems to me to be on a maintenance programme as opposed to suddenly the doors are no good and everything else. I just wondered what the maintenance programme was for.
Given that was a single question, should we have Councillor Williams as well?
Chair,
Have they been answered?
yes.
Okay. I suspect Councillor Wright will probably be a little more to answer.
Thank you, Chair. I've only been able to track down records from the 1st of April 2010, which is when the council moved on to the Planner Asset Management System, which is the IT system we use to record plan maintenance, repairs and reactive repairs. Over the course of the last 3 years, there have been £107,000 spent on maintenance and repairs at Arthur Clarke and Albert Road. Splitting that down, I think the figure is £91,000 for Arthur Clarke, and I do have a full schedule if anybody would like to view that.
Okay, Councillor Wright. Then we've got, all I have left on my list is Councillor Edwards and then Councillor Orr. Councillor Eden, question.
Thank you, Chair. Through you, I'd like to ask, please, Admiral, you spoke of various surveys that the Council has received, but I'd like to know, first question of a number, I'm afraid, Chair, why it is that, having been alerted to the need for works as early as 2005, we have reached a point now where suddenly our residents are being asked to pay the penalty of that work not being done.
Somewhat rhetorical, Councillor Wright, but let's see the next
No,
one.
I'd definitely like to hear an answer. The second question is, how much has been spent on care places by the council for homes, extra care housing south of the river? And given that we have an ageing population, is there, and you referred to the fact that north of the river in Caversham, that elderly population is healthier than perhaps in Southfield. Is it in dispute that whether it's 60, 80 or 100, we will all get to a point where we can't look after ourselves. In which case, surely it's a matter of age of occupancy rather than whether or not people need to be supported. That's it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, through you. The 2005 survey to which I referred said that the roof had a life expectancy of 10 years, which was why the second survey was then commissioned in 2012 to confirm what state that building had reached. There comes a point, I think, with any large public building where the type of planned maintenance and reactive repairs that I've referred to in my response to Councillor Vickers simply are not enough, that you do need to undertake major works, and I think the Council is now on notice that some of those major works need to take place very urgently. I have to say, Chair, I do not know the figure for the sum for extra care housing south of the river. I presume that Councillor Love is referring to Cedar Court.
I'm referring to any extra care housing or care home expenditure that's after the river.
Right, I'm afraid I don't know the figure for extra care housing. I'd be happy to circulate that to the members of the committee as soon as I'm able. Clearly the Willows was subject to a major refurbishment in 2010. Again, I'm working from memory, but the figure for refurbishment was in fact something like 1.5 million. Because the schedule of works that needed to be undertaken, particularly in respect of the asbestos, completely outstripped the estimates that we've been given. My apologies to the committee, and I will return to you on the point of extra care housing. The third point that Councillor Ralph raises in relation to the ageing population is that Reading's policy, which echoes and completely mirrors national government policy, is that we should be seeking to enable people to live as independently at home for as long as possible, which is why we've introduced a really successful reablement service of which Councillor Ralph is aware, and would be looking at telecare, spend over £1 million, for example, in terms of disabled facilities grants, purchase care packages in the community in relation to domiciliary care, and encourage older people to lead active lives in relation to friendship, culture, leisure, sports, anything that keeps people active in the community. The pattern that we have seen over the last 4 years has been a reduction in the demand for residential care, with people either remaining in their own home, potentially in sheltered or extra care housing, followed by a very short period at the end of life, either in nursing care or supported in their own home with home from hospital and end-of-life care.
Councillor Edwards, please.
Thank you, Chair. Through you to Avril. We talked about the moving of residents. I'd like to dig a little bit deeper on this by asking this particular question. What sort of plans have you actually put in place for this? We talk about a move, potential move in the summer, with regard to safety and safeguarding of these very frail and elderly people. In the past there has been a successful transition for frail people who lived in the area to use home. What have you actually planned to do? What's the strategy so we can give their families some reassurance that it's going to be absolutely first class, top notch, and their parents or their family members will be safe?
Thank you, Chair. If a committee takes a decision to either close the home or people have to be moved on a temporary basis, subject to works being undertaken, all of the 20 residents will have had a personalised care assessment, which is why I'm able to refer to numbers of people who need dementia care, numbers of people who need nursing care, and so on. We would repeat those individual assessments and would work with the family to work out what was the best package for the individuals concerned. I'm aware that there's been some concern expressed about, particularly for self-funders, how that would work for them financially. At the moment, self-funders in Arthur Clark pay £735 a week, and what the council would be in a position to do, subject to your decision this evening, is to seek to use its buying power to enable those people to move without an increase in their residential care fees. We'd also work, I think, on some of the issues surrounding transport. I'm aware of the case of one gentleman that's been brought to my attention who is able to use his mobility scooter or whatever to visit his wife on a regular basis. And I think we would need to look both at her needs for a safe transition in terms of she's used to a visit from her husband every day, which I'm sure is a great comfort to both of them. And we'd also want to look at his needs because if his health or emotional well-being were threatened by the fact that he could no longer see his wife on a daily basis, then we would need to put some provision around that, and would have every intention of doing so.
Councillor Orton, please.
Thank you. Mine's a question of clarification around option 2. It refers to a smaller number of bedrooms being available. Can you say a bit more about exactly how many, what that means, and what effect that would have on people who could come back or couldn't come back or whatever?
Chair, through you, if the committee decides that it wishes to carry out the major upgrade to the home at this point, that would involve the installation of ensuite bathrooms and doing some substantial remodelling around the communal areas in the home, because the only way in which the home meets the 4.1 metres standard in terms of open communal space is by using the conservatories, which clearly are cold in winter and hot in summer. We have not done any detailed work in terms of floor plans. What we estimate is that we would have probably a care home which would have, say, 20 beds, moving down from the 28 that we have at the moment, given that some of those rooms are currently less than 12 square metres and don't include ensuite facilities. The impact of that would be that clearly people who continue to require residential care could move back to the home, because the home doesn't currently provide for people with dementia or nursing care needs. I think over a period of time we might then need to look at the viability of maintaining residential care provision and potentially look at a mixture of residential and dementia care to specialise the home. The impact for self-funders in the area who wish to live there with fewer bedroom spaces would undoubtedly be an increase in the fee level.
Thank you. Thanks, Scott.
Thank you, Apple. Thank you, Chair. Most of the questions I was going to ask have actually been answered, but I don't think anyone's actually asked about the future demographic issues that we're going to face as a country, and obviously in Reading locally. And I just wondered if you could elaborate what you think the impact of those demographic changes will be, both in terms of the ageing population, but also the changing, you referred to slightly, the changing desire of people to have different kinds of care. And what do you think that will have an impact on for our needs to provide as a council in the future?
Thank you, Chair. As I've outlined to Councillor Ralph, we know that there will be an increase of over 20% in those people who require some form of care, whether that's residential care, dementia care or nursing care. Probably the greatest rise in demand will be for nursing care, because people very consistently say to both national surveys and local surveys that they want to remain at home. And they want to remain at home with a range of support services brought in. That doesn't work for everybody, and there will continue to need to be some residential care provision for frail elderly.
Sorry, I hope people can hear me. The impact for all councils will be a need to review the types of housing options that are available for older people. That will have to include the use of telecare. It will have to include disabled facilities grants to enable people, for example, putting grab rails or level access showers or whatever into their own homes. And it will mean that we have to do a different range of community-based provision to ensure that there is a way of continuing to engage older people within their own community. There has been some mention made this evening of particular pressures around the health service. In fact, the major pressure for Reading isn't bed blocking. It's actually, we have a very good delayed discharge rate, so we're very good at moving people out of hospital into care. I think the major challenge for us is to ensure, one, that discharges from hospital are clinically safe and of good quality, but secondly, to look at the type of end-of-life care that people say that they want in their own home, and I think that has to be a theme for adult social care over the next year.
We're about to move to the bid, but Councillor Eastwood and O'Connell, are you happy with that?
I just have a quick question for you, Chair. Avril, we've heard that many of the alternative homes suggested to families were also not up to the desirable standard that's a criticism of the Ardcart care home. Would the council guaranteeing families that if option 3 went ahead, they would have their own bathrooms and rooms that are 12 square metres in size?
Don't feel under any pressure. Any questions have already been answered.
Thank you, Chair. The Council will be absolutely committed to giving, if the move was to happen, whether on a temporary basis or a permanent basis, to giving families the choice of having a home that met absolutely the most modern standards, which would be a 12 square metre room minimum with an ensuite bathroom.
No. Sorry, that doesn't say that on your list.
Councillor Eastwood, do you have a question?
Thank you, Chair. Through you. Avril, I see that 86% of the members of staff who work at the home are females. I'm interested to know how many members of staff there are at the centres and the home themselves, and what arrangements are going to be made for them if the centre is to be closed and if the home is to be closed. What arrangements will be made to keep those employees in work? And if there is no arrangement to be made, what redundancy terms will they be offered?
Thank you, Chair. Through you. To the best of my knowledge, there are 28 employees associated with care at Arthur Clark. Clearly, in relation to Albert Road, staff would either remain at Albert Road or transfer to Phoenix, subject to a later discussion. The 28 staff who are currently there We think our provisional estimate is that there would be 4 to 5 redundancies out of that 28 staff group. We would make every effort to absorb very highly trained and skilled workforce back into other operations that the council undertakes. The Willows, for example, the reablement team. We would also seek to work with alternative care home providers if there were a closure. To say that if we were purchasing a number of beds in a particular home, we would negotiate with the care home to take on those staff. This isn't a formal TP transfer, but we can negotiate to ensure that those staff move over. A, because that's very good for residents, and secondly, the care home gets some very dedicated and skilled staff into the bargain. The redundancy provisions that would be on offer would be the council's standard terms, which I believe are up to 52 weeks at double salary, subject to age. I think the terms are better if you're over 45 than under 45.
Well, I mean, the sponsor to say anything about that.
There is a statutory provision, but I think, the council has adopted a programme whereby I think it's a maximum of 50 weeks salary if the council makes people redundant. But then there is a statutory regime. At the moment, it's a council regime. It's 50 weeks salary, 50 weeks weekly salary.
Councillor Horton, did you have a further question?
Yes, please.
And then, is that it in terms of the questions?
Thank you, Chairman. My two questions for Admiral Wilson are, firstly, why hasn't the whole site been considered as one agenda item, as there is much mention of the joint facilities, and if you get rid of one home, then you're getting rid of the other home? And secondly, and I'm afraid it's been obvious from the very first question from the administration side this evening that the decision has been made already. Will the council ensure, by using all appropriate mechanisms, that the site is retained for the provision of residential care for the elderly for the future? As we've seen from the campaign, there is the need and the desire for a facility here, and I fear that the administration... Okay, thanks.
Chair, through you, I think the reason that the two separate services have been considered separately is that they are indeed separate services. It would be, I think, have been wrong not to focus the committee's considerable attention on some very important decisions relating both to residential care but also to the provision of respite and day care. In relation to your second question, I have to say, Councillor Wilson, I think that is a question for the committee itself, and I wouldn't feel able to answer that because I think that takes us into the realms of a policy decision.
Okay, right, we're going to start the debate proper, and I'd like to invite the member to introduce the debate, please. This is new for us all. We've obviously got a matter which is generally raising a lot of interest, and we said we'll learn as we go through these courses, and I think speakers and microphones and things that we will certainly need to look at very hard for future meetings.
Thank you, Chair. I think what would be helpful is if I move a suggested decision for us to consider rather than having a more general debate, because we've already had quite a lot of that already. So I have a written copy of this, which I've got 75 copies because I was hoping that there would be enough to go around for most of the members of the public and the press who are here tonight as well. Before I talk about that though, I want to start, sorry, I'm not very good with microphones, I'm used to bellowing.
Can we just wait?
Apologies.
If for no other reason, I'd like to cite that as well. Or councillors can have a copy. I don't know if we're able to get one or two copies upstairs so we can share those. I guess in a new age you might have this on the screen or something. Councillor, if you'd like to introduce your motion then.
Thank you. Before I talk about the motion though, I do want to start by thanking the people who are here this evening representing the campaign to save Arthur Clarke. You've done an excellent job of putting the case for Arthur Clarke, both in public and in private, and I've met with some of you over the weekend. And I'd like to thank you for that, and also for the tone which many of you have adopted, which has been very constructive. If the decision before us tonight could be based only on the case that you, the campaigners, have made, it would be straightforward. You have set out clearly to me, and I think to the rest of the committee, why the residents and their families value the service that Arthur Clarke provides, and rightly pointed out the disruption that moves mean for current residents. As councillors, we've all heard you loud and clear. I think we all agree with much of what you've said. Arthur Clarke does indeed provide a high standard of care that is highly regarded by residents and their families. I think this shines through in the consultation responses. It attributes to the dedicated staff who work hard every day the best quality of life. And I'd like to put on record, please, my thanks for everything that the staff have achieved over the years. And I'd hope the rest of the committee, and indeed everybody here tonight, would join me in that. Unfortunately though, we are in a difficult position of having to consider not just these views, but also other factors that must be part of the decision-making process to make the right decision for residents, their families, future care users, and the Reading and Caversham communities. Although the care at Arthur Clarke has not been compromised, the fact is that under the service, an independent survey has concluded that significant works need to be done to ensure that it remains safe. Now I've questioned this and I've looked at it in a lot of detail, as I'm sure the rest of the committee has as well. And some of this work could be put off, for now at least, but it's clear that other repairs cannot wait. And I draw committee's attention to the independent report which says there is a high risk of failure which could result in building closure. I would like that not to be the case, but the risk will only increase as time goes by. It would be completely irresponsible for us as a council to do nothing and to face an emergency situation in the future when, instead of a planned and managed move, would be forced to put frail and elderly residents through an emergency closure. I think we've all found making a decision here really difficult. I'm sure I'm not the only one, in fact I know I'm not the only one who has lost sleep over this, even amongst the committee, and I dread to think how it must be for the families. However, one thing that's been really clear to me is that I could not look residents and their families in the eye if in 6 months or 12 months' time, possibly in the middle of winter, we were faced with an unplanned emergency closure because the plumbing has failed or the roof has collapsed. According to the independent survey report, these are very real risks that we face. I don't think we can delay this, I don't think we can deny this. And unfortunately, the risks will only increase as time passes. Putting off this decision would be risky, and it will become more risky. It would be highly irresponsible, and I actually think immoral, and I don't use that word, I don't think I've ever used that word in this chamber before. I stand to be corrected, but I think it would be immoral to put it off. And that's why I believe that the option that's mentioned in the report of ceasing new admissions and waiting for residents to move on to other care is just not feasible for us. This option would also damage the current community atmosphere that is so important and so valued, and I think a number of the public speakers tonight put that very eloquently. With the presence of asbestos and the scale of the work required, we've been clearly advised that it's not possible to do the work while the residents remain there, particularly some of that most urgent work that was referred to by officers related to the plumbing. In the surveyor's report, they use a slightly more technical language of mechanical services, which to you and I think means plumbing. This means, whatever we decide, we will have to move residents out. This is the clear advice of the independent surveyors and the care professionals who know this best. I'm clear, however, if we make a decision to do this as councillors, and also I think members of the public, and I'm sure, I know, residents and their families will want to know that we can do this in a way which takes into account the needs and wishes of residents as far as possible, and that we provide the sort of care we would all wish for ourselves and for our families. And that disruption, of course, must be managed down to a minimum. The advice is clear that 2 moves would be more detrimental than a single move, and I know that families would disagree with that, and that's something which we need to consider. I've looked at the case for the upgrade and the case for closure, both of them very carefully. We could do the minimum refurbishment consistent with safety, but I believe this would miss the opportunity to improve the physical facilities in line with the standard of care. With 5 residents per toilet, small rooms and smaller community facilities, this will not serve the aspirations of this council, future generations, or staff, or families, to provide homes in buildings that are as high quality as the care that is provided. Another option that we can consider is to do that more substantial refurbishment of Arthur Clark as a care home. Again, this would involve 2 moves, and unfortunately, in order to achieve this, it would mean that the number of roofs would fall, and so the number of residents in Arthur Clark would become smaller, and that would affect, again, that valuable community spirit that we all know. And I visited the home twice recently, and I think that's something which we really would want to lose. I've concluded that the closure of a care home is the only option we can take as a responsible council, at least as a care home. It would be possible to close and not to say anything about the future of the site, which is the remaining option that's actually in the report. However, it's clear to me that the community, residents and families would wish this site to continue to be used to provide facilities for older people. And I'll say a little bit more about this in a moment. But first, we cannot and we must not forget that the moves that will have an impact on the current residents, and they're the people I think we should be thinking about first here. With that in mind, I'm proposing that the moves must be based on individual need. Some residents do need to move to nursing or dementia care anyway, because their needs have changed. Others can move to alternative residential accommodation. But whatever their need, I want all residents to have that choice of an ensuite room. And Councillor O'Connell, I think you asked that question, and I think that's a very important one. I also propose that we authorise officers to mitigate all social, emotional and financial impacts for residents on an individual basis. Now that could include things which families have raised with me, for example, arranging trial visits to alternative care homes, support with transport for regular visitors, and I think that would be particularly appropriate for those 6 residents whose family live in the Caversham area. The 14 residents whose families live further away may not choose that, but it's got to be on an individual basis. For those who fund their own care, we should find ways to support them by mitigating the financial impact. And officers have already mentioned that this could include using the council's commissioning relationships with care homes within Reading to negotiate down costs and to ensure that there's not that financial detriment. And I think it was Councillor Eastwood, my colleague Councillor Gavin, mentioned the importance of groups of friends being able to move together where they wish to do so, and of course where their care needs allow. Regarding the staff, I agree with Councillor Eastwood. That's something which we should be really considering. And as I said, they make the home. They are the people who provided the wonderful care. And we should do everything possible to reduce the need for redundancies through offering alternative employment, and by encouraging those care homes where residents move, where it's appropriate and desired by everyone, because of course we can't force people to work anywhere, to consider employing these dedicated staff who've been so effective in supporting Arthur Clarke residents. And I think officers will take the spirit as well as the wording of the motion I put forward to reflect that what I think this resolution suggests is that councillors would want everything possible to be done to support residents at this very, very difficult time. However, as Councillor Hopper actually mentioned when he was speaking as a member of the public, we're not limited purely to the options in the paper. And I'm bringing a proposal that I hope people will consider very carefully, and I hope also that many of the people here tonight will be interested and keen to get involved in thinking about this. Looking at the future from demographic predictions and trends in service take-up in Reading and Caversham, it suggests that there will be a future need for extra care housing, and the Council has an outstanding policy commitment to seek sites for this. And suggestions from many of the members of the public actually include the idea that we should be looking at the site as a whole and looking at what we could use this for to support our older population. Extra care housing is really special. I visited Oak Tree House on a number of occasions, and that's the most recent of the extra care housing in our borough. It's housing that allows residents to live as independently as they can, but with more support and care provided when and if they need it, so they don't have to move. This can range from residents who have no support needs, moving forward to those who require 24-hour support. As I said, the most recent extra care site in Reading is Oak Tree House, and that's in West Reading at Dee Park. No site has been previously identified north of the river, and I think Councillor Ralph may feel that's not a good thing. And I believe that the future for the Arthur Clarke site should be that we consider extra care on that site. The affection that that site is held in has been made very clear tonight. Those who live in Caversham, I believe, should have the opportunity to feel like Mrs. Muriel Cook, who moved to Oak Tree House last year. She said, "We are thrilled to bits with our new home and can't believe how lucky we are to be here." Extra care housing can also include facilities for elderly people in the local community, and Oak Tree House does that. I know someone who goes and has their lunch there quite regularly. And I think we'll talk a bit more about that later this evening when we look at day services. More work is needed to ensure that we can deliver extra care housing, including asking the Policy Committee to take this forward, which is why I put that in the motion. But I thank all of those who have offered to seek funding and partnerships, whether it's the suggestion of working with the Department of Health, the Homes and Communities Agency, benefactors, housing associations. I will work with anyone who can give me a future for this site. I hope that many of those here tonight will support this goal. I believe this is something that ought to be beyond politics. It's something that will affect all of us as we go through our lives. And I'm sure no one in this room needs to be reminded of family members they may have who are reaching the need for extra support. I do hope the committee can support this as a way of continuing Arthur Clarke's tradition of providing excellent care for elderly people, but in a modern building that will meet the needs of elderly residents well into the 21st century and maybe even beyond. Thank you for listening.
When's it going to close then?
Councillor Ennis.
I'm sure that many families residents want to say. I'm just going to say that you might not enjoy what I'm going to say, but I think the campaign's been tremendous. It certainly made us listen, and that's why it's important that we had the discussion tonight and not last week in a politically charged council meeting, that we had a chance to read the papers and to question the officers' concerns. It is an officer report from Reading Borough Council based on the options and not a political decision. I think your campaign has been tremendous, and I totally respect you for that. It's a last resort for us all as politicians. It certainly is for myself, but I know it is for
for all politicians to close a home, and you wouldn't do it. You wouldn't do it, if we didn't have to, and we wouldn't do it without moving the residents. And I totally understand the situation about elderly care. I mean, my wife is a full-time carer, and I know that she battles day in and day out for the best for loved ones. We do it, we've seen it in our own families. Some people want to live at home and some don't. But it's that battle from day to day, and I totally understand the frustrations you must feel with us at getting to this position. As a local councillor in Southwark, I'm a Southwark councillor, where I, in my time, have seen 2 care homes closed. Edward Hughes was closed by the Coalition, was closed by yourselves, Councillor Willis, Councillor Balsden, and in fact, Councillor Daisy Benson, and Councillor Ralph. For the same reasons. For the same reasons. And we understood that, although the frustrations that I felt representing, I was on the other side, and I totally felt the frustrations, but got the reasoning behind why that needed to close. It was painful, and it was painful for the families, and it was painful for the residents. So we do know, and you yourselves know what it's about, the difficulties of closing the home. And the listening process is there, hence the motion. However, the independent survey is really what we want to read and look at, and we can't ignore that. It's an independent survey, not a survey commissioned by the for the Reading Borough Council. And it is concerning that despite £107,000 spent in 3 years, so this argument about it not being deliberately run down is not true. There's quite a lot of money to be spent. Major works need to be done that will involve planned moves. Whoever takes over, whatever happens, planned moves will need to take place soon by the residents, and it will be involving them moving out of the home for a period of time. And I feel, sadly, regretfully, the best chance as a responsible authority, which we have, and we've got to remember that as administration, as councillors, and we have a duty of care. We have to work with the families who are frustrated with this decision if it takes place tonight, is to work with individual families to get the best care for residents. Already we've heard that some residents don't live in the Caversham area, and we can assist them. Those that do want to stay in there, and I totally agree with that. That's a totally legitimate reason of frustration to ensure you want to stay in your own area and live amongst your own community. And that the best bet for me is to work with the individual families, the campaign to work with the individual families and the residents to get the best deal possible for care. In fact, some of the discussions that I've heard tonight, I might be wrong, in fact the care would be better for some of the residents. I know you wouldn't hear that, I know that, I appreciate that, you can do. I think it's legitimate, but I think it's a point that's been made tonight, and I believe that's to be the case. I've seen it myself in Southwark. We do need, as Councillor Balsden has raised the point as a local Caversham councillor, we do need to look at resourcing in the Caversham area for elderly care, and I believe that motion deals with that. And I'd like to see that forward, to look at extra care housing. So my final thoughts is, looking at the motion, I have no alternative but to support that. Thank you very much for listening to me.
Can you tell us when the home is going to close,
Ladies and gentlemen, please, we're having a debate. Councillor Ralph, please.
Thank you, Chair. I think by any measure, closure after a tragedy. I think that it's a tragedy on a number of counts. I think for the present residents, it is a great shame. And I am going to get political to whoever said don't be political. But I think after successive years of underfunding, underspending, for those bad works or the deterioration works to all come together, so suddenly it's of extreme urgency. And we're saying that the heating might fail this winter, so on and so forth. I think it's appalling. I think to have let it get to that state is just not good enough. And by any measure, the fact that we are standing here now using those as excuses for the closure, I think is just unacceptable. I think that there is a degree of responsibility here. It's the Labour administration that has consistently underfunded the home for years, as it has with Alborough Day Centre, but we'll get to that one later. I think that the renovations, we've heard about all of the urgent works and so on and so forth. When I spoke at the last council meeting. I said that we needed to have precise timescales of exactly what was needed and when. And Councillor Eden said yes, she agreed. In fact, her amendment to my motion was a bit lacklustre and unspecific, but she did agree we needed that information before we got to this point. I don't think we have it even now. I don't think we have the very precise timescales and work schedule that will be required to get this done. We've heard about the alternatives having to move residents out, but I don't think that we do have the precise timescale to be able to say exactly when and for how long, and have the residents actually been asked? Have we asked them? Would they be prepared to move out for a short time on the basis that we would renovate the home and take them back? Have we asked the question? I don't know. Perhaps someone can answer me in a minute. And then, last of all, I think there's what's right. Should we really be closing this home? For years, since I've been first a councillor in Pebble, I engage with different residents, and they talk about the importance of having a local care home. People don't want to move south of the river. They don't want to move away from the place that they've lived in for their lifetimes. And I accept that some of them aren't from Caversham, but equally for the ones that are, they've been in Caversham most of their lives, their family and friends are in Caversham. It's really important. And you could say, well, for some of these residents, they're not actually going to be going out of the front door. But nevertheless, it is that emotional aspect that is so important. And it is important to their family in terms of being able to get to them easily and regularly to visit. And I think that for us to say, oh, shame, got to make a decision, this is it, turf everyone out, I just think it's not on. It really is not on. And I know that some of the friendships that have been formed in Arthur Clark won't be sustained. We talk about friendship groups going together, but I know, I've already spoken about some specifics where I know that people are going to be separated, very close friends. So, this is an absolute tragedy from so many counts. And I think that we should be looking, albeit at this late stage, we should be looking at real investment and development. And if we can do that by running a parallel site, so building a new site, putting our residents into it, and then renovating the old site, then I think we should consider it. We're finding funds for all sorts of other things. We've got a bridge going across the Thames for cyclists, and it doesn't actually go into the centre of town. That's going to cost us 4 million plus. And we're looking at 1.4 million for this. So, let's get our priorities right. This is important, and I don't think we should close Arthur Clark.
Thank you. I've just, as everyone else has, had a look at the motion before us. And I have to say, I'm surprised and somewhat heartened by the commitment to the site being used to meet the needs of the elderly north of the river. That was one of my main concerns at the Open Council meeting last week. However, this is a massive decision to make, and I'm finding it very difficult as an individual to decide on whether to vote for the motion with the extra care housing being offered, because the friends and the residents weren't given the option of considering this, and so they haven't had the opportunity to say whether they think this is a good use of the land and whether or not this might be something that is suitable, for their family members and perhaps themselves in later years. Could not this decision be deferred until we've had a chance to consult with those people that have already been involved in the consultation process, so that we can see what the consensus opinion on the extra care housing north of the river is? Just a question.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Gavin, please. So, no other indications to speak.
Thank Thank you, Chair. I think this is one of the hardest decisions that I have ever had to make as a councillor, and I think every councillor sitting in here this evening. So don't think we haven't taken this, that we aren't taking this lightly, or that we don't take it seriously.
You haven't got all the information.
It is heartrending to hear individual stories, but I have to remind members here this evening that we have a greater responsibility than just, I'm afraid, to the individuals who live in that home currently. We have a responsibility to look to the future and to ensure that we have a provision going into the future which is fit for purpose, which provides the sort of care and extra care housing which we're going to need as the population ages and as the demands and as the sorts of housing that people want and need has changed. Arthur Clark is a wonderful home. It has given a secure environment to hundreds and hundreds of people over the period of time. But it is an old-fashioned home in the sense that more modern and newer homes offer a different sort of facility which we know through lots of research, through lots of indications, through talking to people, is actually the sort of care that people want to move into. Just the information this evening, which, having done an individual assessment on the residents that currently live in the home, we know that actually many of those residents require nursing care or dementia care, and that the traditional sort of residential care which is provided by Arthur Clark is not really suitable for their needs, and they need to go into that higher level of care. It's a progression, and it's something that we all have to come to terms with, but for us as councillors, we must, I know it's so difficult, and it's so difficult for me, but in a sense we have to take the emotion out of this and think about what is best for the long term in Reading, what our responsibility is to all the people of Reading and to all the residents in Reading. And I think we just need to keep that in mind. Thank you.
Councillor Horsden.
That's it.
Thank you, Chairman. As the sheet provided to us this evening, after more than an hour and a half's debate has proven, it was a deliberate waste of time because it was the decision was taken in advance of tonight's debate, so there was no debate.
Hear, hear. Yeah.
In fact, the decision was taken before the parameters of the consultation were agreed and set.
Absolutely.
The council proposes to spend £60 million on new civic offices, but £1 million on Arthur Clark.
Outrageous! You should be ashamed of yourself. Absolutely shameful.
In the one consultation meeting that I managed to get myself into, along with Rob Wilson, our local MP, and Councillors Hopper and Stanford Beale, we were told that the roof needed replacement in the next 3 to 5 years. Why then is it now so urgent? What has changed? We haven't had answers to this and many other questions. The fact is, as I say, the decision was taken a long time ago. Is Councillor Eden, through you, Chair, 100% confident the Council has exhausted all possible avenues for keeping Arthur Clark open? I, for one, Chairman, am not convinced.
Hear, hear.
Councillor Eden's proposal of extra care housing tonight is all very well, but
it is just a sop to try to make the pill less bitter. A smokescreen to cover the closure.
Yeah. Yeah.
In summary, this decision should have been about people, not politics. Labour's failure to invest in the last few years and as a result of which the residents are paying the price. The consultation was flawed, the outcome predetermined, and democracy has been sadly lacking. Tonight has been a sick charade when nothing that any of I or any other councillors on this side has said has going to be changing the outcome tonight. My colleagues and I on the Conservative benches will continue to back the campaign and fight against tonight's decision. And lastly, as I know all councillors have had sleepless nights, well, I certainly have, and Councillor Eden has said so, I think we should all take a minute and think about those residents and families, because my heart goes out to them, the relatives as well and the staff. If we could just take a minute, please.
Thank you, Councillor Wolston. You finished? Thank you. Councillor McGallagher, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not going to talk for too long because I think that we've talked an awful lot around this. I'd just like to say, though, that this was not predetermined, as Councillor Bolston would have us all believe. And I'm really disappointed that she's taken this opportunity to just start a slanging match about how we've let things go. The public meeting that she went to, she talked about the roof having at least another 3 to 5 years, which, as Avril Wilson has spoken about this evening, which was why another independent report was done, which told about these urgent works that need to be done. Now, she's happy to take these poor frail relatives and the residents and have them moved out tomorrow, as Avril Wilson said, would have to happen in order to make sure that this was safe. I'm sorry, but I disagree with her. I don't want that on my conscience. And I also do not want on my conscience a do-nothing approach where we look at letting things slide and we look until how long do we have to wait? We've been told that these things are urgent. We are told that these things need to be done now. If they aren't done now, are we going to wait until it's winter and the heating goes? Or until the roof goes? Tell me, where is our baseline for this?
Invest in it now.
I'm sorry. But we would still have to move these frail people. As it's been clearly stated, they would have to be moved at least once. I'm sorry, but I don't see anything here that says that moving them more than once is not an option either.
Have you asked?
It's not, I don't believe that it's a fair thing to do, and I don't believe that we can do this with the residents in situ. And with that in mind, I will be supporting Councillor Eden's motion because I think that it's the fairest thing to do, both for these residents and for the future of the residents, the people north of the river, that the opposition are so keen to make sure that there are facilities for them. Councillor Eden has included that in the motion. And Councillor O'Connell's comments about consulting on this, it's clear in the motion as well. The residents north of the river will be discussed as to what they want to have happen to that land. And I think in a really difficult situation, this is about as the best outcome as we can come to.
Thank you, everybody. Councillor Vickers, please.
Thank you, Chair. I would just like to say, in regard to, my husband has been in the building game most of my married life, which is over 40 years. So I do know something about maintenance and everything else. With regard to the plumbing and heating being dangerous, all of a sudden it's all got to be done. This could have been noted on planned maintenance works and dealt with as and when it came up. Not necessarily with the lift's got to come out, it's got to, but you plan and you maintain. So that hasn't been done. The families are very clear that they want their elderly relatives to stay in the home. So they must be very, very satisfied with not only the quality of care, but also their surroundings. So they might have small rooms, but the care is more important than their surroundings, as long as they're looked after and are safe and secure. We have got a very ageing population. It's all said we're all living too long, and our children are saying we're never going to get pension because all you lot are living longer and longer. We need good quality care homes for our elderly people. Okay, you can put some people in sheltered accommodation, but some people would like to be in a community. I've said before about my mother, she's coming up 90, she's just actually been up to Arthur Clark's, and one of the ladies, Wynne, had her 100th birthday. Now, I've been saying to my mum, I think you need to go. She actually said she liked it so much, she would actually like to go there, because it's all self-contained, it's very homely, it's very friendly. And I think with our ageing population, if we start closing our care homes, we are going to end up, like we have with our schools, we're going to be in real Queer Street, where we have to get more schools, more places for our elderly people. And I'm sorry, but I think this is one thing that we should never ever close. And also, if it's under the care of the council, we can ensure that it's up to quality and the standard is maintained, whereas if it's not, we have no say. We can actually keep this within ourselves. And I think we should say it.
No other indications. Councillor Orton, you said your rights. Speak now.
Thank you, Chair. In seconding this, let me say what others have said. It is not a decision I take lightly, or anybody does. This is very, very serious, and everybody, certainly high up, as we're concerned for the residents now and in the future. And I think in seconding Councillor Eden, I know that she has special care for people and has taken all these issues very seriously and losing sleep. So the first thing to say is just that, as a preamble to what's been said. What I'm going to say. I think the point about the council making decisions and what timing and so on, tonight we've seen a large amount of time with questions to the director for clarification and explanation of what's happening. That we are moving this after we've heard all those detailed answers to our detailed questions and other detailed questions. That is the case. And it boils down to this for me, that the report says that, and I'll quote this, the mechanical system posing a high failure rate with risk which could result in a building closure. On the hot water presents contamination risks. Now, after that, people have said that there could have been works done earlier. What the question that we've heard tonight is, some of the works, two things about them. First of all, they are built up to become urgent when they weren't urgent before, and the council was warned it would need to them in the future. That's the first thing. The second thing is that undoubtedly people will have to move out of the home while these works are done to avoid those risks. Now, I've heard a lot tonight about emotion from residents, I understand, from other councillors. What I would say, having read this report, I personally would feel that I was failing in my duty of care if I ignored this advice that had been taken and ran the risk of building failure in the middle of winter, somebody suffering as a result of that. Now, that's something, you may agree with me or not, but I can tell you I take that absolutely seriously. And any councillor who ignores that advice and wants to do something different, if anything happened as a result of what they're saying, would have that on their conscience. You can't get away from that. It's not an easy decision, it's very painful. But having received this advice very, very clearly from independent sources, from intense questioning tonight, and still got the same answers. The risks are too great to take, and I, for one, would not sleep. Not only sleep about the decision, I would not sleep every night. And I've been in council for health social care, so I know what it's like to be faced with risks and things happening that you don't want to happen. It is very, very serious. Now, the second point, we start off having, before I make a final point, on the extra care housing, that is a very, very positive proposal. It's something I've worked for in the past, other people have worked for in the past. It is a way forward. It will provide enormous benefits to Reading residents, and our vision is for each area in the town, including north of the river. And for me, the sooner that can be done and implemented, the better. Because that is something that will benefit not only our current generation, but future generations as things progress. On the question of I've mentioned the fact of the maintenance programme, and the arguments on that were false. And then from a very difficult debate was turned into a tax on us, I have to say. And therefore I do respond by pointing out that there was 1 year when this council was controlled by a coalition of the Liberal Democrats and the Conservatives. Decisions were made by Cabinet, as was the time when we've done that, and we showed 3 Liberal Democrats and 6 Conservatives. Councillor Benson was the chair.
No politics.
No, sorry, there were 3 terms, and this is purely factual. I was actually going to praise Councillor Benson.
And so you've got about half a minute.
Okay. Councillor Benson went into detailed questioning like we're doing, came to the conclusion and moved the situation to close at home. Because people over there saying they never close at home. One of the first things that that coalition did with 6 Conservative members was to close at home. I just point that out and leave you to your own conclusions about doing the right thing at the right time, and what you say when you're in opposition and what you say when you're in control.
So why did you invest there?
There was an inconsistency there, and I'll leave people to make up their own answers. So my main point is about I would not want on my conscience those high risks that have been reported to us. So I think for a mixture of what we have to do to mitigate those risks at the home, and for the future in terms of extra care housing, which I think has a very positive future for the area, I will second the rest of it.
Councillor Anderson, just wait for the mic, please.
Thank you, Chair. Listening to this evening and obviously reading the report beforehand, it appears to me tonight there's sort of two sets of people here tonight. You know, we've got the ruling Labour group, then we've got the Green Party, we've got Liberal Democrats, Independent, Conservatives, all the friends, relatives, Arthur Clarke, her residents, saying a completely different thing to that ruling group. And it's all very well and good to sit there and say, yeah, you know, we've had sleepless nights and this is a really big decision, toughest decision we've ever to make in politics, etc. But for me, that tells you that you're not making the right decision. And this isn't a matter of... This isn't a matter of your head and looking at these figures and bottom lines and red lines and margins, etc. This is a matter of the heart. And this is a matter of looking at those residents in the eyes, those families and friends of the people that are genuinely being affected. That's in this decision you're making here affects their lives and how they live. And no wonder you can't have sleepless nights where you look at those eyes and then you're still making this decision, because quite frankly it's disgraceful. And I think, you know, the failure to make the right decision tonight, and the failure, you know, to close this home and to making the wrong decision, really, it's more than devastating. It's a tragedy. For me, this is why, you know, we should keep Arthur Clarke open.
Councillor, do you want to sum up, please?
Thank you. Before I speak in detail, there was someone who called out in the gallery on a point of clarification. I think perhaps they hadn't seen the motion asking when would the home close. My motion suggests that if we pass it, that the home would not close until all the residents had been found suitable alternative accommodation with all of the things that we've talked about this evening. So I hope that answers that question. What we've heard tonight from different councillors, I think reflects actually that we do all care about this. This is a decision about the heart, as Councillor Anderson said. But where I disagree with Councillor Anderson is that I know that if we pass this tonight, I will go home with a clear conscience. It's not an easy decision, but I think what we have to consider here is that you can always argue for delay, and I think some councillors here tonight have argued for delay. Well, here that's too risky for me. I don't want a home which has got a high failure risk which could result in building closure, as the independent survey says. I think you can also always say, shouldn't we have done this sooner? Well, some of these works weren't needed to be done until now, and if we had done them sooner, we would have had to close the home, at least temporarily, sooner. And that's something that nobody wanted to do. Nobody wants, I think, us to shut the home. I think who's in this gallery, I think that's quite clear.
But you are.
There's no reason why extra care can't be used by those whose needs don't change in the future. And Councillor, I'm sorry, I forgot who raised it, asked about, well, should there be a chance for people to discuss whether they want extra care? And that's why the motion says, and I give a lot of thought to this, and actually I didn't finalise my motion until today, and I utterly refute what Councillor Balson has said. I give a lot of thought to what we should say there, and I think that's why it's important to say that we should consult, because we don't want to prejudge the future of that site. I'm suggesting substantial investment in the future of that site, because I think that's the right thing to do, and I think the affection that people have for Arthur Clarke is something that we should recognise. I'm speaking from the heart here, and I really do believe that this is the right decision. It's safe for the residents not to be in a home where the building does not enable us to continue to give that standard of care which rightly the residents have come to value. It's also right for us to consider that the demographic changes in Reading mean that we have people who are actually, there's a waiting list at the moment, I believe, for extra care housing in Reading, and yet we have vacancies across town, including in Arthur Clarke, but other places as well, in residential care. And that's because, although there will always be a need for residential care, I think probably even when I'm at that stage, there'll be some people who still want residential care. Actually, there's an increasing need for extra care, and those who are going into residential care is reducing. So we have to consider the emotion, we have to understand the feelings here, but we also have to think about what's the right decision for the long term as well. So I think this motion gets the balance right between caring for the residents of Arthur Clarke and making sure that, given that the move has to take place, the survey is clear about that we do everything we can to support them, but at the same time we think about the coming generations and the future needs. You know, my granddad says to me, I'm not going into a home until I'm old. He's 86. That's the sort of people who we need to think about, those coming generations of people who want to live independently and perhaps only at a very late point in their lives move into nursing. So I'll say nothing further. I think everything that could be said has been said. It is not a difficult decision in a way, because actually the survey is very clear. What is difficult is about making sure that we do everything we can, and I can commit to that tonight, that I will do everything that is possibly in my power, including my weekly meetings with officers. It will be a standing agenda item, there's no doubt of that, to do everything we can to support those people who are affected. But also, I will do everything I can, and I will work with anybody, regardless of what they say about me. I will work with anybody who can help me get funding and help me make it happen that we can get a really good extra care facility for communities north of the river.
Well, don't put the money off it. Thank you, Councillors. We now move to the vote on Councillor Eden's motion as circulated. Those in favour? That's 7. Those against? That's 6. That's carried. I now propose that we move on to items 7 and 8, if we take those together, and depending on progress, we may then for a short break. Councillor Eden, please.
No, I mean, it's not.
Conservative rules, that's what I say. Ought to be ashamed of yourselves. You're evicting people out of their homes. This list on here, the homes that you've given us, they do not come under the CQC. Why should any of us put our relatives in homes that do not come under the CQC? They're rubbish. Not all of them have bathrooms either. So why should they go to that? You're telling us you're going to put us in homes with en-suites and bathrooms. On this list there doesn't. You don't say that. Get your facts right beforehand. You're rubbish. I hope you all sleep well in your beds tonight. Councillor Jones, do you put your mother-in-law in one of those homes that needs care? No. Can I just ask, if you actually asked the community which they would rather?
Those of you who want to leave should leave now. Those of you want to stay. Councillor Eden,
That's the problem, lady. One black people who take the toilet.
Councillor Eden, do begin, please.
Thank you, Councillor. I'm actually somewhat surprised by so many people leaving because I think the next item on the agenda regarding Albert Road and the future of day services, I think a lot of people say...
Because
it's as bad as the last one, that's why. Carry on.
These two items, I've asked them to be taken together because I think they do link together, and I think because they're both about daycare services in our town. What I'm suggesting is that we do a similar approach to what we did with the previous item, where we ask the officer to introduce the report and the items that are before us, and then we ask questions to clarify or to tease out some of the issues that we're maybe not quite clear about, and then we move on to a debate about what we should do. I hope that's agreeable to you, Chair.
Check. Happy with that? Questions to both reports on agenda item 7 and 8. Who'd like to do that? So, if you inclined, if you have more questions, we move on to the debates.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I thought that Admiral was going to introduce it first, so I was just waiting for that.
Oh, sorry. Yes, sorry. My mistake. It is possible.
Thank you, Chair. I'll give a brief introduction to these two interrelated reports. The Council's current has just gone through a non-statutory 3-month consultation with service users at Albert Road and Phoenix around a proposal to merge daycare and respite care facilities into the Phoenix site. Accompanying that was a much broader consultation with a range of older people's organisations and representatives, which was really trying to help the council to understand what the needs of older people are in the future, as well as the people who are currently using services. So the first report seeks to update committee on the results of the consultation on the proposed merger and sets out 2 options before you. Option 1 is to continue with the existing facilities at Albert Road, accepting that it's a very different building to Arthur Clark, but it's 100 years old and it does need work. It shares the site with the Arthur Clark building, therefore to enable it to run as a standalone facility, we need to put utilities in, so they were simply used in one building. We'd have to extend out and build out a kitchen area, because at the moment the kitchen for Arthur Clark serves Albert Road. We'd certainly have to do some work around toilet and bathroom facilities, which are not usable by a number of people with disabilities. And the lift, of course, there is no lift in Albert Road, and only one room therefore downstairs, one thin room is usable. There is no doubt, as with the debate about Arthur Clark, that this is a very, very well loved and used facility. People who use Albert Road rate it very highly. It provides, I think, very, very loving respite care for a number of very frail elderly people whose carers need that break. However, I should stress to committee, this is not about closing the day service provision in Reading, it is about merging it, so there would still be daycare provision available. I draw committee's attention to the fact that there are two options before it set out at paragraph 5.1. Chair, very briefly, I'll then go on to the second report, agenda item 8, which sets out the result of the broader consultation that has been undertaken with a wide range of individuals and organisations. Personalisation in adult social care, meaning that people get personal budgets and can therefore choose to buy in a very different way, means that the demand for traditional daycare services has diminished. And people are buying things in a very different way to support leisure, culture, friendship opportunities, as is their right, given it is their budget. However, what the consultation came back and said was that people still wanted a specialised daycare facility with the kind of support that's offered at Albert Road and indeed at Phoenix. The council specifically tested a proposal to develop an older people's resource centre. That met with some favour, but a third option emerged during the course of the consultation, very much based directly on what people were saying, was that what older people were saying they want is services offered from a network of centres and facilities, possibly with a single centre for specialist support, as outlined, but wanted to make the best use of the community facilities that are available within their own neighbourhood. And Appendix A and B of the second report set out the kind of very rich mixture of assets and facilities that are available both north of the river and in the Southcote area, which has, as already described, have the highest concentrations of older people. I would say nothing further at that point, Chair, but we'll be happy to answer any queries. Thank you.
Any questions? Councillor Gavin? Anyone else?
Thank you, Chair. Through you to Avril. There has been some comments made, if we go ahead with the merger, about the difficulties of transportation, and that residents that live north of the river will not be able to access the merged facility. I'd like that clarified, really, because clearly if we're going to merge, it's got to be accessible.
Thank you, Chair, through you. I think it's worth pointing out that there are a number of Caversham residents who already use the Phoenix Centre because it's much better suited to their needs, because they have a range of disabilities and aren't able to use Albert Road, we very satisfactorily work with those families to provide transport to Phoenix. The Albert Road daycare users and Phoenix daycare users also meet 5 to 6 times a year for the sorts of social facilities that it's not possible to run at Albert Road because it's a much smaller space. So Albert Road daycare users can access the building. On the specific issue of transport, we're very mindful of the fact that there are more car users who use Albert Road than Phoenix. Phoenix is almost solely people access the site through adult social care transport. We would need to work out detailed transport plans with each individual who wanted to transfer to the merged facility. I think that's a critical point if you chose to merge the facilities to the success of making that work.
Councillor Ralph, please.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, I'd like to clarify, and I've got a couple of questions again, but and this might be a hearing problem on my part, I thought, through you, Chair, that I heard you say, Errol, that this is not about plans for closure, this is about plans for merger. Is that what you said?
Yes.
So you're not proposing the Albert Road close?
Let's have a question.
Well, I'm just checking that my understanding is correct, because I'm sorry, I thought I might have been.
What's the next question?
Okay, the next question is, can you tell me how the pattern of use has changed between the percentage of dementia sufferers that are current users versus, say, about 3 or 4 years ago? Can you tell me similarly how the pattern has changed in terms of our older people who live alone and who would that would be their only point of contact with other people? Because my understanding is it's diminished considerably in terms of that category, but perhaps you tell me. And the last question is, if you could tell me, please, what the accommodation is for carers and the respite for carers.
Councillor Listed next. Anybody else?
Thank you. Chair, if I could just clarify, I did indeed say that this was a proposal about a merger, not a closure, because the Council has committed in policy terms at the meeting in February this year at Cabinet to continue to provide a range of daycare and respite care opportunities. Therefore, this is not about withdrawing from that commitment, which some other councils have chosen to do. We recognise absolutely that there is a need for high-end respite care within the community's needs. The point about social isolation, which I think is your point about this being the only point of contact for a number of people. People are choosing to access a different range of services and very much to start to use those sorts of facilities that are set out at Appendix A and Appendix B. The Council's very, very conscious of the fact that social isolation is as dangerous for older people as smoking. There can be no doubt that having access to friends, colleagues and loved ones within the community makes a huge difference to emotional well-being and indeed health outcomes, including mental health outcomes. And the research on that I think is unanswerable. However, what people say is that they don't want to use the type of daycare that the Council currently offers. Most people would prefer structured day activities where they could drop in for a couple of hours, yoga, tai chi, zumba, bridge club, social contact, and that's what they want to see provided within a community setting, which isn't to say that there isn't a need for people who are very frail, some of whom also have dementia, to have access to more specialist help and support, which is currently available at Albert Road. And could be available at a merged centre. I think that covers your points.
Councillor Eastwood, please.
Thank you, Chair. Through you. We had a member of the public speak earlier who was a carer and brought her member of her family to the centre. She raised some very specific concerns as to the logistics of the move and how it would affect her and other carers such as herself. And those specifics were around, you know, if the visits were to become short and the people actually wanting to do the driving had other commitments in their day. So what, if she were to be in a position to be able to have this microphone now and ask the question, I guess it would be that she would like to know what arrangements could you make for her. I'm sure that what she doesn't want the outcome to be would be for someone else to be able to make those arrangements and drive her family member. I apologise, I don't remember who the family member was. But you've indicated there are some parking problems, so what could you do to help this particular lady and other people in her position?
Thank you. I'll be relatively careful about how I answer, Chair, because I don't really want to get into discussing absolutely individual circumstances. What we would plan to do with everybody who's currently a user, if the centres were merged, would be to do an individualised transport plan. That could be using a combination of Redbus, the council's own transport system, looking to see if there were opportunities to offer car sharing, etc. I think there are some very particular issues, particularly for people with dementia, about transporting for long distances, and we would need to handle that very carefully and would intend to do so. Without talking about the individual case, I'm not sure I can go much further at that point.
Okay, thanks. No other questions? Councillor Edwards?
Through you, Chair, to Avril, can you just expand on the 70k works that would have to be done at Albert Road Daycare Centre to make this viable for continuing, perhaps in a more restricted way, to offer some fantastic services?
Thank you. The 70k figure comes from Appendix F to the Independent Survey Report, and is a breakdown of the 790k figure that we previously quoted for the overall package of works, 720 at Arthclark, 70 at Albert Road. In fact, we've done a little bit more digging around on that, and we think the required works will be building fabric, and again plumbing and heating systems, with some electrical work as well. It's very much the same set of problems because they do share utilities and facilities, so what happens in one building actually is tending to happen in the other building as well.
Thank you, Chair. I have a question specific to the Albert Road and Phoenix services and a more general question. My specific question is, you talk about a merger of the services, and one of the things that people say they really value about Albert Road is the dedicated staff who provide a really wonderful set of activities and really make people feel at home. So my question is really, what happens to those staff? How do we make sure that those that quality of care and support that people get when they come to the day centres could continue under the merged service? And my second question is more about the future of day services. Because one of the things I think is very clear is there's actually a lot more going on for older people than perhaps anybody realises. And I just wondered what officers' view would be about how we can ensure that those services provided by the council and by others reach more people, and how could we, do you think we should improve the services that are provided around our town, including in Caversham?
Thank you, Chair, through you. This is a merger proposal. If that were accepted, staff would transfer from the existing Albert Road facility to Phoenix. There would be no redundancy position. It would be the same staff providing the same level of good quality care for the same individuals. On the second point, I think one of the things that officers have been really struck by during the course of the consultation is the fact that families and indeed of people's organisations have consistently said, we don't know what you do. So the council really does have to up its game in the context of making sure there's readily available information within the community, that we are picking up at the point of assessment, ensuring that people know the range of provision that's available. And I think that's true in Caversham and indeed the rest of the borough.
I'd allow Councillor Ward to the second part on the last sentence with Councillor Eastwood.
It does follow on from Councillor
We must have been thinking of something at the same time, Councillor Eden. So on page C19, through you, Chair, to Avril, it says, describe how this proposal could impact differently on people based on their age. And there is a point which says adapting to new surroundings would probably be difficult, at least to begin with, and some disruption to care would be inevitable as people adjusted to new care workers. Well, if it's a merger and if there aren't any changes to staff levels, then why would anyone need to adjust to a new care worker? Why would the care worker not be really with them?
Thank you, and I'm grateful to Councillor Eastwood for drawing attention to the equality impact assessment, which must form an absolute bedrock of the committee's decision making in respect of this proposal. I think what's being referred to here is that there clearly are already staff at Phoenix, so if the services were merged, there would be some possibility that new staff will be being introduced to service users who transferred from Albert Road, not that we wouldn't be taking the Albert Road staff over.
Then we, Councillor, you asked us to collapse both consideration of both reports into one. How do you want to move on the reports?
I have two different motions, but I'd like to talk about them at the same time.
Shall I not do that? I find this last minute merging of two different subjects that are separated here as two different subjects and expecting to have a comprehensive and well-ordered debate with people suddenly jumping two things together. I find it's entirely unacceptable.
Well, Councillor, I was happy that we took the opportunity because the reports, as I'm sure you will agree, overlap in substance and in fact, there are facts that way, but I think it would be difficult thing just to now consider two motions at the same time, so we need to take them separately. If I could have a copy of that.
Thank you. So perhaps if people want to have a copy of my motion to item 8 anyway, when we come to that, they'll have that already. It was noticeable to me in the last debate that no alternative... I'm sorry, apologies.
Okay, so let's start.
Thank you, Councillor, Chair. In the last debate, I was the only councillor that brought forward a proposal, and I'm grateful to colleagues who supported me on that. I don't know if that will be the case in this debate as well. But when we come to look at Albert Road and Phoenix Day Centres, I think we can all agree that we value having that centre of expertise that particularly provides care for people who may be very frail and elderly, and also provides that respite care that is so valuable. And a member of the public who is still here, I think, pointed that out very eloquently. I think what's important when we look at this is that the case regarding the building is actually quite similar to that of Arbor Clark. The only difference is that the building is even older. So we've had that discussion. What I'm proposing is that we do take that option to merge the services without loss of service, but recognising that for some people that will cause disruption, particularly to transport issues, and that we do, again, ask officers to do everything possible to mitigate that, and I think officers talked already about an individual transport plan. One of the things that people have really said that they value about Albert Road is the staff, and I think our staff do a wonderful job at Albert Road, and that's why I was keen to just clarify that issue of the staff transferring to Phoenix. I think that's really important to provide that continuity of care. It was said earlier that we should think about Albert Road in the context of Albert Clark and in terms of looking at the whole site for the future. And that's why in my motion I'm suggesting that we include Albert Road in the consideration of extra care housing. Because one of the things about Albert Road is people have a real affection for it, and the Friends of Albert Road have done a wonderful job over the years. And I think that it would be a shame to lose that. So one of the things that's really wonderful about extra care housing is it can include facilities that actually people who live in the local area who don't yet need to live in extra care housing or choose to stay in their own homes can still access and get support. And I think that could be a really positive future for our really loved Albert Road. I think also that there is some relevance to what I'm going to move in item 8, which is about that importance that people place on local services, which is why I was going to move them together. And this motion that I'm bringing before you doesn't address that, but that's why I'm bringing forward another motion under item 8, because I think although we want that specialist centre of expertise that can provide really good respite care and really good support to very frail elderly people, we also want to ensure that those people who want to access day services in a different way are supported too. So it's about one size not fitting all, and I think that was something which a member of the public said. I wrote it down and I thought that's exactly right. We have got to make sure that people are offered services that suit them. I think it's right as a council to continue to offer council-run day services. I know that's controversial, and some councils are moving away from that altogether, and not just Conservative councils, councils of all persuasions are closing day centres and saying we are not going to provide a day service anymore. We've been very clear, I think, in our commitment to a day service, and I think that's the right thing to do, because as a council we can provide that specialist centre of expertise, and I think people who use that service really value it. And someone said to me in a private meeting yesterday, until you get to the point where you need some of these services, you don't ever think you're going to need them. And I think that's the case for some of the services that we provide at Phoenix. You don't imagine yourself doing what one of my family members did, of having that very high level of need for a long period of time where you need that regular respite. You don't imagine that for your retirement. You imagine the Tai Chi in the Harris Garden, which another of my relatives does. And I think we've got to still provide services for people who perhaps didn't envisage that they would need those services until they did need them. And very importantly, that's also about providing respite and support for the carers who do such a wonderful job in looking after their family members and relatives. So that's what I'm moving under item 7, and I'll see what people say.
Thank you, Councillor Eden. That's seconded. Councillor Horton, thank you. Councillor Ralph, please.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I'm well and truly confused now. Point E, close the building at Albert Road. Have we not just said, does this involve closure? No, it doesn't. Why does it say, point E, close the building at Albert Road? And that is a fundamental difference. I mean, what are we supposed to trust? What are you telling us? It is or it isn't? I mean, this is This is ludicrous, quite frankly. The whole issue of Albert Road is, yes, it's a very much loved, well-used area. I have said for some time, and I continue to say, I was visiting both Albert Road and Phoenix only a few weeks ago, that part of the reason for them both being underused is because no one promotes the services they have to offer. Because a lot of people don't know what services they have to offer. A lot of people don't know where Phoenix Day Centre is who happen to live in Caversham. A number of people, and I have some specific examples in terms of residents of mine, who have suffered from dementia, have gone through a phase of dementia where any travel is really, really stressful. On one occasion, and it happened on a number of different times, but with one chap, he would go to Albert Road from only the other side of my ward, so not very far. And invariably his wife was asked to go and pick him up because he was so stressed by the travel. What do you think travelling all the way to Phoenix is going to do? That, you know, people have said, no, travel isn't an issue. Well, for certain individuals, yes, it will be. And Albert Road is a well-loved, much-used centre, which we could make a great deal more of. Again, we've got the situation of consistent years of underfunding, so now suddenly the job is a big job, and we need to spend more money than we can perhaps afford. But nevertheless, it serves a great purpose. The staff are excellent, absolutely excellent, and they are so good with the people that they work with. And the people that go there are delighted to go there. Now, unfortunately, as we've seen increased numbers of dementia sufferers, so we've seen those who live alone and rely upon visits to Albert Road for their contact with other people once a week, have been squeezed out. But I think that if we were to properly segment our target market, now it's the old 4 Ps of marketing. You get your price right, define your product, make sure it's promoted properly, and it's in the right place because it's at Albert Road. So all those things, if you do it properly, will get people going, and it'll be much used, much loved. There won't be any underuse, and it'll be serving the residents of Reading.
Yeah.
No other indications this complete comes to it.
Thank you. Just going back to the staff, and I think this is more of a question again, but it would be really good for us to see if we can get it out into the open, if there's anything we can do for the staff who inevitably will be affected by the move. I imagine there will be some that rely on either public transport or they walk indeed to the current location for work, and to be moved location, you know, it could inadvertently mean that for some who have other commitments, family commitments, having to fit around the school run or whatever, it can make things quite difficult. So can we offer a degree of negotiation and flexibility with those staff members, that they won't be expected to immediately conform with working patterns that are set for them that may well be in line with what the existing centre has, but would actually render those people unable to commit to those working patterns. So could there be a degree of discussion with individuals and looking at some flexibility there to allow for people to be able to continue in their work without being detrimentally affected in their own personal lives?
What worries me a little bit is you say you will do transport from Caversham over to Phoenix. From my own personal experience, a lot of elderly people they must be on time, and they don't like, they like continuity. Now, unless you're going to do, like Redibus is going to pick up one and take the person, there is going to be a time delay. So what I'm worried about is that the elderly people will be sat there waiting. I'm going to bring my mother in again because it's her. She sits there because she knows they're coming between 11:30 and 12. She sits there from 11:15 in her coat out the front door. So if you're going to transport people over to Phoenix, they're going to be so worried that, oh, what time are they going to come? That I can see a lot of anxiety coming into just what would be just a really enjoyable experience. But also, they, as you know, they like to be in the community that they live in. So if you're going to take somebody out of Caversham when they're elderly, they're going to go, where am I going? And they do get confused, and they like to be where they are. And I think the amount of money it's going to cost to transport the people over, you may as well keep the Albert Day Centre going, because it will be.
Councillor Gavin, please.
Thank you, Chair. I think just to clarify for Councillor Ralph, the service is not closing. Where it is being delivered is being proposed to be changed. So there is no change to the service. It was made very, very clear. There is no service closure. There is a proposal here before us that we cease to use Albert Road. And one of the reasons that's being proposed is because the building is inappropriate for current needs. It is not compliant with the disability requirements of the Disability Act. There is no disabled toilet. Disabled people cannot use the centre. I think I'm correct in saying that there is, so already there is clients who could well do with using, having respite care and using a facility who cannot use it because we are not providing gold star facilities for our residents, and we ought to be. Therefore, we should be looking to provide something which is appropriate to people's needs. And I think the other point that I would reiterate in terms of the transport issue and whether people from north of the river would go to Phoenix, that the Director has already made very clear to us that there are already a number of people that live north of the river who use the Phoenix Centre now because it meets their needs, because Albert Road does not meet their needs. And therefore, this impossibility of somebody that lives north of the river being able to travel south of the river doesn't hold water because it is already happening. And I think that we need to be I think we should be supportive of this in the sense that we should applaud the council for keeping open day service and being committed to day service. Councils up and down this country are closing day services, full stop. Will no longer provide day services. We are committed to keeping day services and providing day services for the most vulnerable people in our community, and then providing within the community the type of range and variety of activities which, if you like, the younger, older residents would like to do. So having a menu of provision from which people can personally choose what suits their needs. And I think that's an exciting opportunity and one that we shouldn't miss the chance of taking.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, I'd just like to actually say I was really pleased that Councillor Eden praised the staff of Albert Road. So often they can get missed and just be seen as sort of commodities in these situations, so I thought that was great. And secondly, actually, her use of the phrase, not one size fits all in these decisions, I actually think, although I may disagree with the decision you're making, actually, I appreciate the time and care that you seem to have followed to go into this. I don't envy the decision that you're having to make. However, I think Councillor Ralph touched on the point, both in this instance and with Arthur Clarke, that actually it's years of underfunding and it's years of counting the pennies and thinking, oh, we'll put that off to next year. So next year, that has led these buildings to get into a dilapidated state. And and has led to underuse. You know, that's nobody else's fault, but who's in charge. If these buildings aren't being used, that's the fact that you're not placing people right, you're not publicising it well enough. So for me, while I disagree with this decision, I also think you need to take a long hard look in the mirror and look at what you've done for the last 10 years, the last 30 years, of being in control and leading us to this situation.
Thank you, Chairman. Carers and users value the location and this thriving home, very much part of the local community. We heard earlier from Reverend Pike. She pleaded with us not to take people with dementia away from their local community. We also heard from Juliana Beechcroft, sorry if I've got her name slightly wrong, a commonly held view that the community cherishes Albert Road's small and intimate care. The impact to carers who transport their loved ones will be hard to bear of the extended journey that they will have to make. I've had many calls and emails urging me to oppose tonight's proposal. The argument that users these days want services for shorter hours, possibly for the odd class here and there, actually goes against Caversham residents in the future travelling all the way to Phoenix. Why would you go such a long way for a very short time at Phoenix? To conclude, because we know the decision has already been taken as the previous one, services need to be kept local for the users and their loved ones and carers. And finally, lack of marketing and investment over recent years is to blame.
Councillor Ennis, please.
We've heard about the protection of the service under cuts, government cuts, whatever. The question we've been told from across is take a good look, hard look at yourselves. Question that building, I think it's a Victorian building, it's over 100 years old, so no matter how much money would be invested in there, would that make a difference to the building for future investment? That's the issue that I've got to grapple with. I'm taking this, it's not taking a hard look at ourselves. We have a building that's Victorian, you can only do so much to protect it. We're not talking about building, we're talking about people. You said earlier as well, people in the services. People will be protected, the services will be protected, and there will be a continuation, as difficult as that may be for some people travelling, and we have to appreciate that. It's a difficult one, but the service will be protected.
Thank you. Councillor Orton, anything to add?
Very briefly.
Thank you. I'm seconding this because it's in conjunction with the next one. There are two issues when you look at the need for day services. The first one is a need for traditional services for people that need respite care or want to go into day centre for the full day in the way that they do at the moment. It's been said many, many times, but it cannot be underestimated. Up and down the country, councils are closing down day services, and I have the directive very, very clearly. What is proposed in the report and elsewhere is the maintenance of the service. The service that is provided by this council, we gave an absolute commitment when we started this, and the commitment remains that those traditional services will stay in Reading, for Reading, by Reading Borough Council, because there is a vital need for a section of the community that needs them. And when others are shutting them and saying go to the private sector, and somebody said about price, if you look all around you at other councils, and you talk about the administration, the prices where they exist and haven't been closed are far, far higher than Reading's. Reading is far, far, and I think it's what, £45-ish or so a day, and it's nearly double that, or about double that in other places. So price is not the issue. Reading Borough Council has been very, very good on supporting people, And that was a big issue, if you remember, when the coalition was in control, that we had to deal with that issue when they made the proposals to increase the charges substantially. So let's be very clear when we're talking about what's the right thing to do. There is a need, and the proposal here will meet that need. The second point is, in the next resolution, those who are talking about local services. Yes, the consultation has shown, and certainly I've moved along well, although I thought this to start with, but the consultation has certainly developed my thinking on this issue. There is a need for local services, and in the next resolution that Councillor Eaton moves, services for people who Councillor Gavin called the younger older, that are coming through now, need a whole variety of things that can be provided locally, and the proposal is to provide them in Caversham and elsewhere, and to develop them. That category of people probably need more at the moment. There is work to be done with the voluntary sector. There is work to be done on better utilisation of council assets. All that can be done and will be proposed. And the reason I'm supporting this one is because it's been tabled what the partner resolution, as it were, is, and together they make up quite a vision, in my view, for the future of the development of day service in this town. Rather than turning our back on them, as many councils are doing, this council, if these resolutions go through, will actually be moving forward into a new era of the right care for the right people and giving a spread of needs and making sure they are met.
Thank you, Councillor Orton. Councillor Eaton, would you like to sum up on the motion, please?
Thank you, Chair. I tried to respect the division, but the debate has gone on to talking about that need for local day services, which we'll come to in a moment. But as Councillor Orton said, I think we can be actually quite excited about the future of day services in our town if we commit to having a centre of expertise that really supports people who are very frail, who need a lot of support, and also provides that support for carers, that they can have that respite that they need. And I'm sure many of us know from our own families just how essential that can be, because often the carer for an elderly frail person is elderly and fairly frail themselves. So I think that's the first half of the proposal, and it's not without pain, because it involves the closure for now of the Albert Road building. But what that does mean is that we can keep day services going, we can keep them with the services that exist. And I think that's where Councillor Ralph, your slight confusion, the building may close for now, but the services and the staff, and that's what I think people want to talk about, is that staff support will continue because the staff will be transferred. There is a very specific issue of transport, and I fully recognise that. And again, as I said with the Arthur Clarke decision, this is something that I think on an individual basis, and because of the numbers involved, we can do this, we can look at this on an individual case-by-case basis, because the numbers at Albert Road are sufficiently low that we are able to look at each individual person's situation, and I will be holding officers to account on that, and I'm sure other councillors in the room will be able to do so too. The second part of the proposal I'll talk about more in a minute, but it does recognise exactly what councillors have been saying about that real desire for local services. And that's something which, again, I'm really excited about. And I think, I don't know if the Reverend is still here, but we're talking about working with the churches, with the GPs, with the voluntary sector, with other faith groups, with anyone who will work with us, actually, because a lot of those people are already doing a lot of work with older people and supporting older people to really enhance that. And then I'll talk more about that in a moment. I would note, if any councillors don't want to support this proposal, this is a committee and we are able to bring proposals. I've brought a proposal. There's nothing to stop any other councillor in this room from having brought a proposal on the last item or on this item. We're all very welcome to do that. And I would encourage encourage councillors, if they really object so much to things, to consider that in the future. We're on a committee, we can be proposals, sorry, I've forgotten who raised it, but there was a very, very good point made about staff transfer and flexibility. And I'm not taking that as a formal amendment, but I think that's a really important point that was made there. And I think we should take that away and we'll, with you, we'll let's hold officers to account on that issue.
Okay, thank you. Let's move to the vote. Those in favour of the motion tabled by Councillor Heaton this evening? 7 those against? 7 is carried. Item 8. Anything to add to item 8, Councillor?
We've all got copies of item 8, which is...
Sorry, could somebody from the public make a statement about the Albert Road Day Centre?
No.
So we're not allowed to speak at all?
Public speaking rights waived this evening, as you witness.
So paragraph 2 in the proposal is a lie.
Thank you, sir.
The consultation did not say that the vast majority of people approved of Albert Road being closed down and being merged with Phoenix Road. So what the council have been provided is a lie. Okay, I've said what I want.
Thank you. I'm moving on to item 8. As I said, I don't want to repeat myself. This is, I think, quite an exciting proposal. I want to talk a bit about the specifics of what will this mean now, before, obviously, the fullness of time, it spreads out elsewhere. What came back from the consultation about day services, I think, was quite exciting. People wanting to do things in a different way. People living their retirement in a more in different ways than perhaps they have in the past, and people wanting to stay local, to work in partnership. Therefore, it's important, I think, with the voluntary sector, GPs, churches, other faith groups, to provide day services as close to people as we can. Now, the council can't build day centres in every postcode in Reading, but what we can do is make really good use of those community assets and council assets to provide day services that may look a bit different from what we traditionally imagine a day service to be, but which really helps people to live fulfilling retirements where they're contributing to the community, where they're part of the community. And I think it's right to start this in 2 particular places in Reading, to trial this before we take it across the whole of town. Now, as a Whitney Ward councillor, of course, I would wish this to be in South Reading, but actually looking at the facts and the evidence, the places where there is a high proportion of older people, particularly in this town, are north of the river in the communities that we call Caversham, Emma Green, Southcote Ward. Now, they're quite different wards in many ways, but what they have in common is a high proportion of older people and also thriving and active communities. So I think they're a great place to start with trialling this new approach. I hope that is something that, I know there's a few councillors who represent those wards here tonight, will be people who are councillors in those wards are really excited about and want to get on board with. I certainly will be hoping that this works really well and can happen in my area of town as well. But it's about recognising that things have changed, things have moved on, and at the same time we're keeping, as I said in the previous motion, that specialist day service for people who need it and want it. So it's not a separate proposal in a way, it's 2 halves of the same coin. It's getting that balance right and making sure that one size doesn't fit all, with providing services that people want. And I think we can also take on board that key point that people are making about making sure that people are aware of what is out there. But I don't think anybody realised just how much you could do. I mean, who knew? You can do bell ringing, you can do flower arranging, you can do all sorts of wonderful things. If you live up in Maple Durham, and the same stuff, that there's so much going on. So I'll say nothing further because I'm in danger of talking about this all evening because I'm so excited about it. But I'll see what others have got to say.
Thank you. Councillor, speak now on it. Okay. Councillor Anderson, please.
Thank you, Chair. Again, I mean, we didn't agree with the last motion. However, we are where we are.